But I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 8:33. This is the State Board of Education, Wednesday, January 21st. And we'll start off with a roll call, Maureen.
All right. Mohammed Job. We got some background noise. Let me find that. I know Mohammed's here. I'm just going to call his name again. Mohammed Job.
Looks like his microphone's off too.
Mohammed, can you hear us?
Maybe, Mohammed, can you give a thumbs up?
Mohammed, can you hear us? No. Oh, Tom doesn't hear anyone.
Huh.
Should we start again?
Yeah, let's.
Mohammed looks like he's unmuted.
Yeah, I am here and ready.
All right.
You can see my face in a bit. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Cynthia Stewart.
Here.
Brian Campion.
Here.
Richard Werner. You want to test your mic, Richard? No?
Is it better now?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Tammy Colby. Good morning. Caleb Greenwood.
Here.
Tom Lovett.
It's like you're on mute, Tom.
Tom says he can't hear anyone.
Suzanne, you want to chat him and tell him to leave and come back? Maybe I don't know what else to do.
Yes.
Thank you. Brianna Marsh.
Here.
Secretary Saunders.
Here. Good morning.
And Chair Samuelson.
Here, good morning. I have one agenda amendment. I heard this morning from Katie Ballard that she's unable to join us this morning. So we're going to have her join us in February. And then I've also heard Zoe's going to scoot her presentation up. And I think we're also going to shift the WIDA language proficiency standards up as well. So we'll just kind of see how the agenda is playing out. But just to give everyone a heads up, we'll do the Special Education Advisory Panel in February. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? All right. Hearing none, are there any members of the public who wish to be heard?
Yes, me.
Good morning. I see Mike Weston. Anyone else, if you can raise your hand using the hand icon on the Teams platform, or if you're calling in *5. And we ask members of the public, we welcome you. Good morning. If you can limit your comments to about 2 minutes, and if you have anything in writing that you'd like to submit to the board, please do so, and then we can include that in the minutes. Mike, the floor is yours.
I think I'm unmuted now. Sorry, I took a bit. Hi, I'm Mike Weston. I'm the principal at Mount Mansfield High School in Jericho. I've been the principal here for 14 years. I'm here to comment on the proposed graduation requirements, and I'll do my best to limit it to 2 minutes. I could talk for a while. I've read the 1231 report. I've watched most of your meetings where you talk about them. I went to the November symposium. Erin Davis came to MMU in December, and we chatted with her. And what I've seen in these meetings and what I've read in your minutes is I haven't seen the mention that there are a lot of concerns in the field about it. As I know you know, in 2014, the EQS that came out switched us from credit-based graduation requirements to proficiency-based graduation requirements. At that time, and still to this day, that's cutting edge. Vermont was the first state to do it. This decision, as many of you probably know, was supported by a lot of research. And I was the principal here back then, and it felt soft and a little bit less relevant and not rigorous. But it was the system that was imposed upon us for the class of 2020. So at my school, what we did then is we started having conversations about the difference between proficiency and passing, about what it meant for a class, for a content area, be it literacy, math, whatever, to be proficient after you've walked across the stage. It forced us to redesign units, projects, assessments, change everything we did. And it led to better graduates. I'm going to be honest, like I said, when it came out in 2014, I didn't think it was, but it led to better graduates. We've had 5 years with proficiency-based graduation requirements. They started with the class of 2020. And I know measurements are based on tests, and tests aren't the best in the world. But in the past 5 years, MMU's been the #1 ranked high school 4 times. And I think a lot of that is because of the work we did by proficiency-based graduation requirements. We're forced to do by the change the state made. I understand the U.S. Department of Ed and everybody thinks we should have more standardized graduation requirements. My question to you, to AOE, to Zoe, to Aaron, was why can't we work on standardizing the proficiency-based ones? Why do we have to return to credits? When you look at the definition of credits from the report, it's a credit is the skills and knowledge typically covered in a year-long course. I know we're trying to say it's not seat time, but when we look at the definition, we're returning to seat time. And I don't think that prepares graduates for where they're going. I also understand the AOE was asked to make a tremendous lift by Act 73, a super short timeline. But I really think they should have talked to more of us in the field. And it's a quaint old saying, but I believe the baby in the bathwater is being tossed out right now. A long time ago, my mom said to me, Mike, never complain if you don't have a solution or want to help. And I'm offering to do whatever I can to help. And I know that we can bend what we do here to the new standards. And I think things at MMU will continue to be good. But I worry about everyone else. I think we're on the edge of having a great system. And I think this is turning us backwards. I appreciate all you do for everyone in Vermont. Thanks. And I hope all the tech stuff works out for you.
Thank you, Mike. I will say we have our Student Performance Standards Committee / it's the newest iteration of what used to be the Education Quality Standards Rule Series 2000. And I know that they will be turning their attention to graduation requirements. And Tammy, not that we were responding directly to public comment, but if you want to just lay out what you anticipate
Hi, Mike.
doing.
Hi, Mike. So in public comment, we don't engage. So this isn't, I'm not going to engage in discussion with you here, but I will say, and this will be part of our update on the standards committee in a few more minutes, is we will be taking up the graduation standards and the recommendations made by the agency. However, we will be going through a thorough process of reviewing those and considering input from the field. And Mike, you are now at the top of my list, and I'm sure the rest of our committee's list to come in and testify. So please rest assured that we will have a very open process where we engage with the field in both considering the agency's recommendations, but also thinking through how that aligns with other statute around proficiency-based grading, our proficiency-based system, and also sort of the existing EQS. So we have a lot of work to do, and we're going to lean heavily on our experts in the field who have experience in implementing all of these things. So, and what works for kids. So thank you for your comment.
All right, thank you. Any other members of the public who wish to address the board? I'm not seeing anyone at the moment. I'll leave this open for a little bit longer and move ahead. Is there a motion to approve our draft meeting minutes from December 17th, 2025?
I'll move to approve the draft minutes of the December 17th, 2025 meeting.
Thank you, Rich. Is there
I'll
a
second that.
Uh,
Mohammed seconds.
All right, Mohammed seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving our meeting minutes from December 17th, 2025, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Bless you, Tammy. All right, we've approved the minutes. Just checking. Okay, we'll move on to board announcements. Are there any board announcements from other members of the board? I've got a couple. All right. So my board announcements, I've got a couple. One, I will say Tammy and I have been invited to testify, but it's really Tammy. Tammy and I have been invited to testify about the report that was generated and approved by the board on the framework that we have provided with regard to small by necessity and sparse by necessity. So we appeared before the House Education Committee last Friday. Tammy, of course, did a wonderful job sort of going through the memo and the slideshow and took questions from committee members. And I think they found that very, very helpful to help ground their work and give them a good place to start. We will have a similar presentation tomorrow before House Ways and Means. And we're also on the books to appear before Senate Ed next week on the same issue. And I just want to take the opportunity again to thank Tammy, Brian, and Cynthia for the work that the committee did to really do the work, and particularly looking at other states. I think it was a very, very helpful memo, and also, giving the rationale behind various considerations, I think has been really, really helpful. So thank you guys. And then the other thing that has kind of grown out of that is that Tammy and I now have a standing check-in with House Education. So as the board knows, the board monthly meetings are on the third Wednesday of the month. Tammy and I will be meeting with House Ed on the fourth Tuesday of the month during the legislative session, just to check in with what's going on from the board's perspective, hear what's going on from House Ed's perspective. And I had requested that we set these check-ins to occur after our monthly board meetings in case there are any issues that are coming up that House Ed would like testimony on. This will allow me to put something on the agenda for our monthly meetings. We can have a board discussion, and then I can report back to House Ed what the results of that discussion were. So we will be doing that during the legislative session. And this is the first time that we've been invited to do that, but I think it'll be really helpful just to keep those lines of communication open. Anything else?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Jennifer, I might just add, the legislative committee, by whatever title that is meeting twice a month. And so has Jennifer, Brian, and myself on it. But I would also just invite other board members to sort of keep that meeting in your back of your calendar. If you have an issue or you want to listen in, that's a good time to sort of hear sort of real time the kinds of discussions that we're having and an update on sort of the things that are going on between sort of our regularly scheduled monthly meetings. So those are, remind me, the first and third Mondays of the month, correct?
Yeah,
Jennifer?
and I'll be giving a committee update later.
Yeah, but just in the context of that, for other board members, if you're curious about sort of what the conversations are, or if you have an issue you want to sort of raise that gets sort of talked about in some of these other kinds of interactions that Jennifer and I are having with the legislature, that's also an opportunity to check in.
Thanks. All right. If there are no other board announcements, Caleb, I will turn it over to you for the student report.
All right, I guess I could get going. I'll get interactive today. So, I mean, it's kind of the dead of winter. We just got back from our winter break. I think we got back the 5th, so 2 Mondays ago. I think that was the only full week we've had since then, because this week we had off Monday for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and then of course I'm not at school today. And then last week we had our Golden Ticket Day Friday, which is basically like a day for people to catch up. So like if you if your grades are pretty good, you're not missing a ton of work, whatever, then you basically get the day off. So that's a pretty cool thing that we do. They used to do it, I think, as half days, and then because that way it would still count as I don't know if it counts as a school day or not in the calendar. I think it does, but I don't know. I know our production for our theater group is confirmed for the weekend of Valentine's Day and then the weekend after that. So the 14th, 15th, and then 21st, 22nd. I think they're doing all 4 days. So we're excited for that. I know that sports are still going on. Honestly, I think as much as our school loves basketball, I think spring sports are where like our school's favorites are. We have a lot of participation in baseball, softball, and then our track team is pretty big considering the size of our school. I know that one year it was sitting around like 40 something people, and we only have around like 400 students. So we have quite a few people, and we're really diverse in our events too. We cover most events, so that's pretty nice.
Caleb, I
I-
will say I got to see the North Country girls varsity and JV basketball teams in action against Montpelier a week or so ago, and those are some pretty good basketball players. You guys have
I
a
believe it.
great team. They trounced Montpelier pretty well, but it was a fun game to watch and terrific sportsmanship. Nice, really nice to see on the court. So you have an excellent sports program.
I know I won't be able to participate in track this year because I believe I'm gonna get a surgery around the end of February for my shoulder. So I won't be able to participate this year. I'm probably still gonna go to a couple meets, like the local ones. Probably go to a couple practices still just to help out. But I know tentatively, because I have a like consultation next week at some point, or maybe it's this Friday. I don't remember, to be honest. It's sometime in the next week, and then that's down in Mount Mansfield Orthopedics, and then we're gonna figure it out from there because they're kind of the second opinion. So I got X-rays and MRI done, and I tore my labrum, so now I need surgery on that, and it's gonna be a pretty long recovery. So it's looking like no track. But we figured get out of the way now so that once I'm in college, I don't have to deal with recovering with it when I'm alone. So yeah.
Brian?
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Caleb. And I'm sorry I have to ask this, but would you remind me, are you a senior or a junior?
I'm a senior.
You're a senior. So I think 2 things. First, I'm wondering if the school did anything in particular to celebrate King's birthday, if there were any talks or events. And then secondly, just give us kind of an update on how you feel about, assistance that people get with college and university application processes and things like that.
Yeah. So first
Great.
off, I don't think there was a ton for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which to be fair, we did have the day off. But I think that's definitely, I think it was probably talked about in other classes that I'm not in, because the only like social studies class I'm taking is government politics, and we didn't have it on Tuesday because it's every other day.
Okay.
But I know like we have like, world history. We have, what is it? I'm blanking on the name now.
That's okay, like a
I didn't
history or
take it,
social
but yeah,
studies.
it's
Sure,
another class in social studies that revolves around like more global ideas and stuff like that. So I'm sure they talked about it there. Same thing with U.S. history. I'm sure it was talked about in there. That's a sophomore class at our school because we do world history freshman year, U.S. history sophomore year, and then it kind of bridges out past that. And then for college applications, I think it's definitely a mixed bag because our school certainly has a lot of people that go into trades that stay around here, that go straight into the workforce, stuff like that. But I think if you seek it out, you definitely have the opportunities because like even like teachers that are in like foundations, which I talked about, I believe, or no, that was in our committee meeting, I talked about it. But I mean, like, there's some super, super intelligent, wonderful people at our school that love to help you. They're more than willing to help you. But I think you definitely have to seek it out a little bit, which is something I think we could definitely work on. Because I know that that part is a little bit strenuous in terms of the student side of it. But one thing that does help is we use Naviance, which helps with like submitting teacher recommendation forms and stuff like that. So without having to like individually go into each college and submit the PDF, it'll do it for you, which is pretty nice.
And would you say, Caleb, do you have a sense of if the students that are transitioning to the trades, kind of the same for them in terms of, you know, they might have to seek out the support, or is it?
I think it's probably more supported just because of the
Okay.
Career Center.
Okay.
Because a lot of our students that are going to go into trades are at the Career Center anyways. So that I think they're definitely just have more or not more opportunity. I shouldn't say that. They have more outlets which they can reach with easier access. Because like for a student, let's say, I mean, my year isn't really a good example just because I have a pretty open schedule this year. But someone who has a pretty loaded schedule in their day would still have to make time to figure it out. Whereas someone that's going to the Career Center, you're basically the person that you would end up going to is the one teaching you.
I see.
So I think it's a little bit easier in terms of access to those outlets.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, and Caleb, I'm remembering last year when you were a junior, you had mentioned something about how you didn't really feel like your school had a good lock on deadlines for applications. And I remember that was something that you wanted to work on, but do you feel like that's better, or do you feel like you've got a handle on what's required and when, and that
Yeah,
other
I
kids in your school do?
yeah, I think it's a little bit better now. I mean, our district as a whole has been a little bit, I won't say in turmoil, but it's definitely been in a little bit of a shake since the whole basically district lead got changed with new principal, new superintendent, new vice principal. Especially considering our new principal is already done after this year. So that's especially going to shake us up a little bit. So hopefully we can find our footing a little bit after this year. But I do think now that I'm a senior, I can like actually see the outlets compared to like as a junior, like they're being offered to me. So I actually like see them a little bit better. I know that in terms of like scholarship packages, those get mailed out, which is pretty nice. So it's not like you have to come to the guidance office and find it. So that was pretty nice because like right after our winter break, they got mailed out, I believe. But since I live in Troy, I also got the North Country one. Because there are some scholarships that like pertain specifically to Troy, even though I'm Lake Region District. So it worked out.
And do you know what your plans are for next year?
Not yet. I think we're gonna hear back like March
Okay. All right. Well, keep us posted.
for sure.
Any other comments or questions for Caleb? All right. Well, thank you. Brianna, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. So, not much has been going on at my school because we just recently came back from winter break and we had like 2 weeks off. So that was actually really nice and a big change from our Thanksgiving break. But last week we had exams. So from, I believe it was Wednesday to Friday was like full, the whole day was exams. And then Tuesday, the like second half of the day was exams. So that was a lot. Thankfully, since I'm in Riverbend, my last 3 periods are dedicated to that. So I actually got to have Friday off because that was all like my Riverbend periods and I couldn't go to it. And then this week we're just kind of slowly going back into like our regular like way for school, and like people are now assigning homework again because last week we were kind of like weren't assigning anything because we were all studying. And then recently with like our sports and theater, for theater, Mary Poppins, like the cast has officially come out, so everyone knows who their role is going to be. And the practices have officially started. It actually started last week, and it's usually just twice a week, but it is for like 3 hours, so it's very long. And then our indoor track program has officially ended. That actually ended a while ago. For us, we don't get like a lot of people on indoor track. It's actually only like 6 people. So it's very small, and we only have like 5-ish meets, and I believe they're all on like Saturdays or Sundays, very early in the morning as well. And recently, our basketball has been doing really good, both boys and girls. Last year for us, our girls basketball almost won the championships, but we lost at the very end, which is really upsetting. So we'll see how we do this year. And boys is actually doing really good this year as well. And just a little bit is I'm also on like student council. So like recently we've been talking about Winter Carnival, and we're just trying to figure out a theme for that because it's going to be coming up soon. I think we're leaning more towards Rio, but I'm not sure. They're going to vote on it today. And then along with that, I am also in the prom committee. So we've been talking a lot about prom and just what our theme's going to be for that, which I believe it's Starry Night. We just actually figured that out yesterday. And now we're just trying to focus on like where we're going to get the decorations for it. And we've already picked a spot. We're actually doing it at Dartmouth Skiway. But yeah.
So, and I'm remembering you're doing backstage for your play, correct?
Yes, I am. So like actually since I'm backstage, last time I did spotlight for it, but since I'm backstage, I don't actually have to go for like another week or two because like a lot of it right now is just like them sitting together and like reading the lines and making sure that they know it. So then like when it actually comes to time to like trying to like perform it a little bit, then I have to start going.
And are you playing a sport, or is this sort of this is what you're doing for the winter?
Yeah, so I manage both basketball teams. So for home games, we like make these like runouts. So it's basically like a frame and then like we do like paper over it. So like when it's time for them to like come onto the court, like they run through the paper. It's just something to gotta get like the kids' spirit out. So for that, I paint usually every single one. So they have something to run out for. And then sometimes I even help a little bit with like their like scheduling sometimes every here and there. But yeah, and then also on top of that, I'm just doing theater. I used to do basketball, but can't do it anymore.
Sounds like you've got a full schedule. Brian?
Thanks, Jennifer. So Brianna, it sounds to me, so much of what you're doing is, let me say this, it seems like you're really, really interested. Like I wouldn't be surprised if someday you ended up either managing a theater company or doing something like, I mean, there's a lot of kind of theater and management stuff there. Is that something you're really interested in?
Actually, I'm thinking about going somewhere in the medical field. I'm not really
Really?
sure.
That's so
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. This is just
That's
more like
great.
I'm
Yeah.
bored
Yeah.
during the winter.
Okay. All right. I mean, those skills, I mean, are transferable, and I think it's great. That's really great. And then I guess I'm curious also, did your school do anything in particular for Martin Luther King Day?
So actually, for me personally, like with the classes that I take,
Yeah.
not at all, honestly. Like
Okay.
I felt like it wasn't even talked about because like I was talking to one of my friends and I was like, wait, hold on, why do we even have Monday off? And they're like, it's Martin Luther King Day. And I was like, oh my goodness, like why did no one mention this? Which I mean, I only have one like social studies class. It's American government, and like
Yeah.
actually last like Friday was like it was exams day. So like our Tuesday and like Monday was really our last day for those classes because it's the start of a new quarter for us because we just finished our semester. So like I'm assuming that we just didn't bring it up because it wasn't like close enough or something, but it wasn't brought up in my American government class. I'm not too sure about other classes because a lot of the kids from like first semester to second semester stay the same with their classes. So
Okay.
I'm assuming that it was probably brought up, but honestly, I did not hear anything about it.
I asked only because even here in town, I don't know if it was the timing or what, but it too wasn't as prominent as it usually is in the community. So I was just curious if schools had, if it was the same in schools or if something different was happening. Thanks, Brianna. I really appreciate all of that.
So, and I have a question for both Brianna and Caleb. So I have noticed that since the food guidelines have changed and we've now put a huge focus on protein and fat, I'm seeing it everywhere. So like I was on the road this weekend and every, restaurant I went into, even Starbucks has protein focused items on their menu. And I'm curious because I know that school lunches are obviously tied in with the federal government and the federal guidelines. Are you seeing like a lot more emphasis on protein at school, or has that not trickled in
Interesting.
yet?
I'll start. I didn't want to like cut him off or anything. But honestly, like my school, we have like really bad school lunches and it's been an issue for a while. And we've been trying to like figure it out. We've been trying to set it up with like maybe like another like food company that we can go through. So I personally don't actually get the lunches because sometimes they don't look too good. But as of right now, whenever I see like what's on the menu, I don't actually see like anything that's like, oh, protein. Like sometimes we'll have it, but like honestly, I haven't noticed the change. Like unless you told me that, I actually wouldn't have noticed that there was like a new thing like put in place.
Okay.
I figured I would let, oh,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry. I figured I'd let her go first since it was her segment still. But although I also don't get school lunch. So bad group to choose from. But no, I also haven't noticed it because I do go through the line still and just like for breakfast I will. But although I haven't noticed it at school, I think this has been a thing for quite a while, like even before this administration. Like one of my friends is in the Air Force, he's out in Montana, and he's like really big into the gym and stuff. And I mean, in terms of like that culture, like obviously like if you're building your body more, you want to intake more protein. But like the whole like protein like filled foods, although I definitely have seen more because I watched like a whole video about it. It's kind of been a trend for, I would say, probably like the past like 3 to 4 years, where it's like, because I think gym culture has become a lot larger as a whole, and it's kind of preached like, you want protein, you want protein, you want protein. So I think it's been like, there's protein cereals, there's protein like cookies, bars. I mean, if you name it, there's going to be like a protein alternative.
Yeah, well, and it's
So
funny.
I mean, yeah.
The only reason I mentioned, to quote my dad, it takes 2 points to draw a straight line, but like one restaurant has, double protein on everything that you order, or you can just get a cup of chicken for extra protein. And then where I really started to notice it was Starbucks, you can add protein to your cold foam. So anyway, not to belabor the point, but I was wondering, because schools are so tied in to the federal government, I was wondering if they were pivoting to really focus on that. So, all right, well, thank you. Anything else for the student report? All right.
I love hearing from you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and I'm also gonna close out public comment, and we will revisit public to be heard at the end of our meeting if any members of the public wish to address the board. So we're going to table agenda item F until February and jump right into committee updates. So Tammy, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So the Standards Committee, the Performance Standards Committee, has met once since we last spoke. That was a bit of an organizational meeting for us to sort of orient ourselves to next steps. Our order of business in the near term was going to be taking up the class size minimums and defining those. We talked a bit at our last committee meeting about our approach to doing that. In particular, we will be starting with defining key terms that are not currently defined in statute, nor are they with respect to the minimums, or upon having Sarah do some digging, they're not defined more generally either in statute or in rules. So we need to define some key terms in order to operationalize the definitions. Those terms are things like school, class, average, things along those lines. So that's going to be the first thing that we take up. We will be meeting monthly at least to do that, and we have a goal of trying to have some recommendations back to the board on the class size minimums by the end of the spring, early summer. Although right now we have a funny timeline with the class size, the statute calling for class size for districts to comply with class size minimums by July 1st, although we're not required to start rulemaking until August 1st. So that we're trying to contend with that, but I think our goal is to have a strong signal to the field by the end of this spring about which way we're going. That presents some challenges for school districts because if they have to implement these on July 1st, they're doing budgets now. My understanding is the agency may have some guidance around that. We've requested it. We haven't seen it yet. I'm hopeful we'll have that before our next meeting so we can take that into consideration as we go forward. We will then start the process of taking up the graduation standards. And I think given the timeline for implementation on the class size minimums, we want to attend to that first because there seems to be some immediate pressure for districts and folks in the field to be able to implement that. But I think you can expect us to start taking up the graduation standards in the next month or so as well. So we got a lot of work to do. And then I think one of the other questions we need to contend with is, are we going to try to handle both the graduation standards and the class size minimums when we open up the EQS at the same time? That's, I think, it depends on sort of if the legislature adopt it. I know we brought it up to the legislature as a concern, sort of this mismatch in dates. We'll have to see what they do about that. And also as a reminder, the class size minimums, whatever we do there in the EQS is a lift and shift over to the independent school rules. So we got a lot of moving pieces, and we're going to have to open up some rules to get this stuff done. But I think the goal is to have some clear guidance, at least informally, to school districts here this spring so that they can start to, I mean, it's not going to be in time to plan for passing March budgets, but trying to get some clear guidance out into the field and on the table so that school districts can start to think about how to implement this. But we will be meeting monthly on the second. Right now, the regular cadence is the second Tuesday of the month in the evening.
Thanks, Tammy. Zoe, and then I have a question.
Just wanted to expand on Tammy's point that the timing is challenging, and I think we need to acknowledge the current implementation realities that districts are developing their fiscal year 27 budgets now. And so because of that, the agency has been proactive in developing a working group to define those elements that are not clear in the legislation to provide working definitions for this current budget cycle. So we have engaged with business managers and superintendents and principals over the last several months to identify where there are areas of ambiguity and also begin to define those key terms. We are doing this now, recognizing that staffing and scheduling decisions could be impacted for the fiscal year 27 budget. We also recognize that full compliance may require a multi-year adjustment, and that's also reflected in Act 73. And the law anticipates good faith progress, not uniformity. So the working definitions that we are developing in concert with the field are intended to support the state board's process in rulemaking, not at all to replace the state board's process. We intend to release those working definitions by the end of January. And we see this as an opportunity to really establish a baseline. And this could be quite helpful in the rulemaking process to lift up any additional areas that need further clarity or might have some implementation considerations that were not fully contemplated. So we see ourselves as a partner in this work and look forward to sharing the findings from the engagement we've had already with the field, and in the hopes that the working definitions that we can come to consensus on for this time in the year can be helpful in moving the budgeting process, but will not be obviously finalized until the state board completes their rulemaking. So really our intent is to support budget decision making now and to align and support your rulemaking process. We are also being very intentional about aligning our working definitions with current data collection processes to help streamline and support that work, and with an eye to the implementation considerations. And then, of course, allow us to, meet those obligations of providing the support within this budget cycle. So appreciate the work that the state board is doing. We will be sharing some additional recommendations that have been crafted with input from the field to guide your rulemaking process.
Thanks, Zoe. Tammy, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's been a process underway for several months. I think it might have been helpful to have a representative of the state board as a part of that process so that these two things stayed well aligned with one another. I think it's challenging for us to be receiving recommendations from the agency at the end of January when we're trying to do a rulemaking process that's considering the exact same things. So maybe next time we can all work on the same page and we can get the state board, members of the state board or the committee involved in your processes when you're doing this broader outreach and things along those lines. That way we can make sure that the two processes are well aligned with one another, as opposed to you doing a lot of work and then handing it off to us, and then we have to evaluate all that work and maybe even start over. So that would be helpful next time.
Yeah, I did signal that this was work underway at the agency, and this was in response to an urgent request because of budgeting right now. And so we've been really clear with the field that this doesn't replace the state board rulemaking process, but part of our role as an agency is to be responsive to the field and engage our partners in developing some of these definitions so that it can inform our recommendation to the state board. So I wouldn't say it's out of process. I would acknowledge that we do have some implementation realities that are challenging given the timeline in Act 73. But continue to be a willing and ready partner in this work, and really appreciate you all taking this on because it is very impactful to decisions now and also in the future for budgeting for districts. So thank you so much for your focus and work on this.
So, and I just wanted to point out with regard, Tammy mentioned, and you're right, the class size minimums that are contemplated in Act 73, it is Section 8A that directs the State Board of Ed to initiate rulemaking to amend the education quality standards on or before August 1st, 2026. And then Section 8B, what is it? Section 8A 2 has a similar deadline of August 1st, 2026 for the State Board of Ed to initiate rulemaking to amend 2200 to also incorporate these class size minimums. So the lift and shift that Tammy referred to is going to be a similar process to what we did with the Act 1 requirements that the State Board of Ed implemented. And so we sort of considered it in EQS, and then there was a lift and shift that occurred with 2200 that was then, the language wasn't necessarily verbatim through because there was, recognition that independent school structures are different. And so there was, some of the language was adjusted so that the substantive requirements were the same, but it did recognize the fact that independent schools are under a slightly different governance structure. And, the rules were written to account for that. So just wanted to put that out there. I do need to reconvene the 2200 committee. I've spoken with Tom, and I think Tom is willing to chair it again. So that is on my list of things to do in the coming weeks. Tom, was that also anything that you wanted to talk to, or did you have a different comment?
Just a question for Zoe, seeing as how the work is pretty well underway and that people are making decisions based on these will make based on these working definitions. I wonder if you consulted independent schools in your outreach to the field and got their input in the process.
I'll have to check on the membership of the working group, but just give me a moment and I'll reference that back.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions for Tammy, Student Performance Standards Committee? All right, so the Legislative Review Committee, I'll give the update on that. So this is a new-ish committee. There have been prior iterations of this committee, but this is a newish committee, at least since I've been on the board. So the Legislative Review Committee is Tammy, Brian, and me. As a general rule, we are meeting the first and third Mondays of the month during the legislative session. We did not meet the first Monday of January just because timing with the holidays. So we had our first meeting this past Monday. We invited Representative Conlon from the House Education Committee. He's the chair. He came in and just it was more of a discussion there, just to kind of to allow the committee to understand, what's going on in the Legislative Assembly, and where he sort of thinks things are going, how the State Board of Ed can support that work. And so we had a good conversation with him, and his report was that his committee has spent the first 2 weeks of the legislative session determining where they are in terms of meeting the goals and timelines of Act 73 and deciding what happens next. As he said, the first 2 weeks have really been a lot of listening, but he said, sooner rather than later, they're going to have to pivot to doing, which he acknowledged was going to be, we all know the legislature has some really hard decisions to make, and it's nice to listen. It's harder to do, but they are sort of getting ready to make that pivot and, really start having those conversations. He also mentioned that, so much of the work that they're doing this session is focused around Act 73, but they're also focused on other things. And with regard to education, it'd be CTE governance and funding, pre-K financing and funding, and special ed. We did bring up this disconnect with the deadlines that Tammy alluded to with the class size minimums. And, so just to recap, the class size minimums go into effect on July 1st of this year. School districts are already building their budgets for the 26-27 school year, so they kind of need this information, but yet the State Board of Ed is not directed to commence rulemaking with regard to class size minimums, either for EQS or 2200 until August 1st. So anything that the State Board of Ed does will not become finalized until spring of 2027. And so you can see that this creates a little bit of a cart before the horse situation. So Representative Conlon heard that, and he did indicate that he would raise these issues with Legislative Counsel and get back to us. I don't know if there would be an adjustment in the deadlines, or if it's really going to be more an assurance to districts like, hey, we do recognize that there is a disconnect with these deadlines. And I think it was in the materials in the agenda packet today that the agency submitted that this is not a bright line deadline. Like, it's an understanding that this is a process, and we are not going to magic ourselves, or districts won't magic themselves into compliance by July 1st. We are working toward a goal that will take a few years to unfold. So I think if nothing else, we can give that assurance to districts that, we're all working toward a common goal. So our next meeting will be February 2nd at 5 p.m., during which we hope to have a similar conversation with Senator Bongartz, who's the chair of the Senate Ed Committee. And then we'll also debrief on, these intervening 2 weeks from our prior meeting to our next meeting. And we'll go from there. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about the work of the committee. And as Tammy said, certainly anyone is welcome to listen in on those meetings if you want. And then we'll be reporting back to you at our regular monthly meetings. Mohammed?
Thank you, Chair Samuelson, and I echo all you had said to say. It's very confusing where we are right now. I do understand all the excitement of the great work ahead, some of which that have already started. Sometimes when we get too excited, we forget exactly what you mentioned. Getting that coordination is really important. And administrators, staff on the field, some are getting RIF letters already it's just in preparation of what's coming up. And it doesn't seem fair, and it's hard, and it feels like we are rushing to get there with all the excitement. Not that we are against anything that is proposed so far, but yeah, I do second really reiterating or revisiting the deadlines and communicating with the field about any changes that could be possible. So we are all aligned and people are well prepared. And it's just hard to understand how to prepare for the next school year without actually having numbers when we talk about money, which nothing is clear for us yet. It's super hard. So I just wanted to add that ingredient on it. And thank you for all you do.
Sure. And Mohammed, are you like how is this affecting the work that you do? I'm just curious.
A lot. I've been already laying people off since last year. Last year, I lost 2 ML teachers. How did that happen? Because we heard there was not going to be Title III funds, and it didn't come until later. It's just create some tensions and confusion in the field. And this year, so far, each of our departments has at least 3, at least at least 3 people to riff.
Wow. Okay.
Just because of uncertainties.
Yeah.
And that's not fair to us. And it's hard to be an administrator in this season without having all the information or all the pieces of the puzzle. And then staff end up taking it personal. Oh, you just chose me. Why not so and so? There are so many factors around this. I think we need to revisit what we have in place and really reshare some promising communication to all and really setting up the stage for the work to be completed before it is actually implemented, because some voices are still needed to be heard around this work. Students, families, all stakeholders. Thank you for that question. Yeah.
Thank you. And that really does provide a concrete example of what I think school districts are experiencing, which, you know, there's no 2 ways around it. I mean, it's just really, really challenging. I'm sure you don't even feel like you're on stable ground, so it's hard to, you know, try to create a budget because there are too many moving pieces and nothing is certain at this point. All right. Well, if there are no other questions with regard to committee updates, I will turn it over to Zoe for the secretary's report.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I will share my screen to run through a few updates for the month of January. Just confirming you can see my screen. Okay.
Yes.
Great. So I'll start by providing an update on our strategic planning process. The steering committees will be organized around the 5 strategic pillars of our strategic plan, and those committees will begin their work at the end of this month. We are launching that process. We'll bring together all of those representatives of the steering committee to walk through the goals of the process and lay out our strategy over the next several months. The objectives for the steering committee are to work with the Agency of Education to refine our vision, to really think through how to operationalize that vision. What does it look like if we're able to attain that aspirational description of where we want to head as an entire education system? And then what's required to be in place for us to actually operationalize that and to put actions in place that will support us in reaching that future vision. The committees will also help us to validate the needs assessment through a comprehensive data review. They will additionally identify and finalize shared measures of accountability along with establishing multi-year targets. I included the link here to our strategic planning framework that was shared at our retreat back in November. And as you recall, within each of the pillars, we've identified measurable goals that we'd like to achieve. Some of those we have noted we currently don't have data or a process to capture because it represents a new area of focus. And so we'll be able to really unpack that further with representatives on the steering committee to understand how we can, as a state, be really intentional and thoughtful around moving forward in these areas and how we will measure our success. So we're very excited to get that started. I want to provide a brief update around the accelerated initiatives. And something I've been consistent in communicating is around how we recognize that we need to develop a long-term strategic plan with multi-year targets and multi-year strategies. But we also have immediate needs now. And so we are being very mindful of identifying those urgent needs. And we've already launched several accelerated initiatives. And I want to provide just a high-level overview on where we are with implementing those initiatives. With respect to our area of academic excellence, there are 2 initiatives underway. One is Read Vermont and the other is a math pilot. For Read Vermont, in terms of recent updates, we have published recommendations to the Vermont Standards Board of Public Education or Professional Education. And those recommendations are related to our charge from Act 139. And they include revising the teaching and leadership standards to ensure that we are defining and adopting awareness level literacy expectations. So all educators understand how students learn to read. Also within these recommendations include a recommendation for literacy-focused licensure exam and walk through our plan to revise our ROPA review process. I will share the full report with the state board for your background and context, and moving forward, we'll be engaging in further discussion with the Vermont Standards Boards to really review these recommendations discreetly and make charge for a path forward. We also are finalizing a report that is required by Act 139 to give a current evaluation of our literacy performance. It also reviews the implementation of the screening tools that are required by Act 139. Within that report, we identify ways in which we're looking to further partner with the Literacy Advisory Council and our libraries to expand our reach and also communication to parents as stakeholders around how they can help to reinforce learning and reading at home. We've recently published a literacy toolkit as well to provide those best practices. The Read Vermont Institute is well underway. We have 11 schools participating in Read Vermont Institute. Just the last couple of weeks, we launched the first cycle of professional learning, and that includes coaching with principals, curriculum directors, and teachers. With respect to the math pilot, we are doing this work with Troy Elementary School, and we are supporting them with implementing high quality instructional materials, and so by also creating walkthrough tools, supporting with the teacher adoption of curriculum. And we're really eager and excited to learn from this process so that we can scale this level of support for math across other schools and districts. With respect to college and career readiness, you're aware that we have provided the recommendations for the statewide graduation requirements. I welcome the opportunity today to field questions you have around those recommendations and also to address those common questions that have emerged from the field, including what was presented in public comment today. We've been really intentional about identifying the questions and being really responsive to addressing those in our report, and are looking forward to the chance today to further explore those areas. In addition to the statewide graduation requirements, we are facilitating a pilot for personalized learning plans, and we have a group of districts that have been part of that work. It is a series to really evaluate how to effectively implement the components of the personalized learning plan and to identify areas that could be further enhanced through improved process, coordination, and tools. So that work is really helping to build insights around how we can further maximize the impact of PLPs to truly guide personalized learning, develop student agency. And this is also connected with the graduation requirement so students can understand if they're on track and give them the opportunity to think intentionally around where and how they want to deepen their learning, because we have been protecting the space and time within the graduation requirements to really allow students to deepen their learning through flexible pathways. Under Safe and Healthy Schools, we have a big push around reducing chronic absenteeism. We have provided statutory updates that are currently with the legislature. These are designed to provide clearer definitions around chronic absenteeism and also to clarify the process. We are taking very much an approach around prevention and identifying the need for students to be in school to really strengthen their learning experience. We are working related to the hazing, harassment, and bullying model policy. We continue to work on developing that model policy and also developing a prevention toolkit. We will be rolling out a revised strategy to the HHB Advisory Council at their upcoming meeting. And that's very much in response to feedback and questions that we've received both through the council and through the other planning efforts that we've been engaged in across the state of Vermont, really taking a prevention focus to this work. Under operational effectiveness, this continues to be a priority for the agency of improving our data reporting and analytics. You will see some new reporting around assessment data that will be released soon that does some additional analytics than what we previously reported. And we're in the process of finalizing an RFP to evaluate, to really bring on some additional expertise to evaluate our current dashboards, evaluate and the timeline of our data collection practices, and to ensure that we can make enhancements to inform decision-making in the field at the time that it's most impactful. So we're really eager to move forward with that work. We started to engage the field in identifying the most critical data points along with the analytical questions that are most needed to triangulate to support them in the field. And we'll be continuing to engage our principals and data managers and business managers and educators in that work because we want to make sure that the enhancements we build in are really supportive of school improvement planning and decision-making at different levels of our system. And related to our fifth pillar, which is enhancing special education and differentiated support for all learners, we have worked really intentionally with the steering committee. We actually first launched the steering committee several months ago. So they were the first steering committee for us to work with. They really helped us to model what we will do with the subsequent steering committees, really analyzing the data, understanding the needs, being intentional and thoughtful around outlining the key strategies that need to be implemented to really help us as an entire state system move the needle in these areas. One of the things we heard from the Special Education Steering Committee was a need to have statewide professional learning on the best practices identified within Act 173. And so we are about to roll out some training that will start as early as the spring, and we're developing a toolkit and a playbook to make sure that we have the resources available in the field to implement those best practices. What was really clear in working with the Special Education Steering Committee is it's not just about more guidance documents, but really being intentional around how we can support with that statewide learning, monitoring, and support. And so we're really eager to move forward that work. Some of the training that we'll launch in the spring is really targeted around areas such as scheduling and things like that that are really practical and can have an immediate impact on learning for next school year. So that's an update on where we are with our accelerated initiatives. I'll move into just previewing for you what's to come in terms of reports and guidance that the agency will be providing this month. We will, or in the next, I would say 4 weeks, so at the end of January to the beginning of February. We will be releasing our AI guidance as a state. And as you all are very well aware, AI is impacting every aspect of our society, every aspect of how education is delivered. And we have an opportunity in Vermont to take a very human-centered approach, which is intentional about not replacing relationships, but leveraging AI to strengthen relationships. We're also being very mindful around preventing an over-reliance on AI. And we know that that can be a challenge for kind of being too dependent, and they can actually create greater disparities and gaps in terms of opportunities for students later in their academic career. So we're eager to release that guidance. It's also very mindful around the challenges and the risks associated with AI, so that we can really create a very balanced approach to how we as a state education system are leveraging AI to support teaching and learning, and also ensuring that we have the appropriate guardrails in place to protect against some of the risks associated with AI. We will also release our 2025 assessment report. This will come also with the school identification that is required by our ESSA state plan. Something we have recognized is that there isn't as much awareness of our accountability framework. So what you'll see in this report is some additional description around how our ESSA state plan is organized, the metrics that have been identified to evaluate school quality and district quality within our system. This foundational knowledge is going to be important as we continue to look forward and refine our accountability framework into the future. So we're really looking forward to releasing that and doing some additional training around the current framework and what is included in our ESSA state plan, along with some amendments that have been made over the last year and a half to strengthen our plan. We will be releasing soon the District and Education Quality Standard Self-Assessment. As you know, we were implementing a beta test, and the districts have completed the self-assessment for the standards that we have identified as high leverage, both with the district quality standards and the education quality standards. And this report is really intended to be a baseline in understanding current state to support us with future planning and how as an agency we can differentiate our support. Lastly, we will be releasing a budget book. The budget book is intended to not just share the agency's budget, but to demonstrate how that is supportive of our strategic priorities as an agency and helping us to advance the critical work and the statewide priorities around education. Within the budget book, we would like to link to the state board's annual report or invite you to provide a letter around some of the state board priorities, just to have that clear coherence as we're publishing that as a critical vehicle to demonstrate the priorities of the agency and how we're funding those priorities. So with that, I will stop sharing to see if you have any specific questions around the work underway.
Thank you, Zoe. Tammy?
So 2 questions. Who is on your steering committee?
So we will finalize the steering committee representation by the end of this week. We sent out another call for participants that participated in our planning retreat. And one of the things I always like to say when we bring committees together is you look around the room and identify who else needs to be here, right? And so that'll be a first question as we start engaging with the committees to make sure that we have a diversity of opinions and stakeholders engaged in the process. But we will be launching at the end of this month. The committees will continue to meet through the late spring, early summer to inform the development of our strategic plan. But we have asked for and are intending to establish representation that is really representative of different roles within education and also includes our partner organizations that help to support and further education goals.
A follow-up question. I just want to talk about EdFlex for a minute and how that intersects with your plans sort of around ESSA and some of these other strategic initiatives, right? So the EdFlex the EdFlex application, approved application on file with the feds, says that the State Board of Education will be responsible for adopting, amending, and repealing education rules and procedures, which falls under Title 16, Chapter 3, 164, which is our purview. So I'm a little confused about that. Are you anticipating coming back to us asking for additional flexibility under EdFlex, particularly with regard to how funds are used, federal funds are used and allocated to non-public schools?
So I think what you're referring to is, are we pursuing any of the flexibility waivers? I think that's something we need to explore and evaluate if that is going to benefit our
Well, we're one of
strategic
the 10
direction.
states that's already approved, right?
That those
Right.
states are approved to exercise, we already have in terms of
Yeah,
our,
that's right.
right. So I'm happy to come back and to provide, I think what might be helpful is to provide an overview of our current SS state plan, to identify for the board the amendments that have already been approved over the last year and a half. And those amendments are in direct response to the monitoring visit that we had by USAID, where they identified certain areas of our SS state plan are out of compliance. And we were required to amend and also incorporate a corrective action plan. I think that's a good starting point for the board to understand the current state. As we move forward with our planning, and identify other areas, ways that we would wish to, evaluate school quality, I think we should explore the ways in which flexibilities would be advantageous to the agency and to the entire state as we're thinking about rolling out our goals through the strategic plan.
Let me rephrase my question then. One of the key things around EdFlex, right, is block granting and consolidation across the title programs and additional flexibility for how those title dollars can be used. And other states currently under EdFlex are coming up with strategies for using those dollars in new, different ways. Some of that would require changes to rulemaking. So, and some of that, of course, is discretionary to the agency. So I'm just curious if you can give us an update on that. And also, I'd be curious as to the staffing configurations that are being funded by the title dollars and how that might be shifting if you're going to be doing that at the agency.
Yeah, so related to the EdFlex waiver authority, I think you're referencing several states that have an approved plan. So Iowa is one of the most recent that received approval. We already have EdFlex waiver authority, and we have several of the flexibilities that Iowa has already been approved. We have considered the consolidation of state administrative funds in the past, but we don't need a waiver to do that. Consolidation of the state level funds would require a waiver. At this point, I think we're continuing to evaluate whether that's something we're going to pursue. And we can provide those updates as we move forward with our planning and review process. Related to staffing, as part of our reorganization, some of the major job responsibilities for AOE staff have changed and evolved. And so what has always been built into our reorganization process was an audit of the federal funds. And so that work is underway to ensure that there's alignment between the major job responsibilities of our employees and the allowable uses of those programmatic dollars for oversight and support of the federal programs. So all of that is underway and is really ensuring that we're having a very close alignment and stewardship of the federal dollars to achieve the intended purpose of those federal programs.
And that includes IDA dollars, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And those are we have staff on IDA dollars that are overseeing special education and compliance with part B, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Brian?
Thanks, Secretary Saunders. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. First of all, I appreciate the way you're approaching everything. There's so much noise in education. I used to talk about this a lot, and I feel as though you and your agency are very focused, and I particularly appreciate the focus on literacy, having worked on that when I was in the state Senate. I think my only question has to do with mental health services, and you mentioned a little bit around hazing, harassment, bullying. I know there's been talk for a long time about the intersection between your agency and other agencies around, addressing mental health issues in the schools. Can you just say a little bit more about where things are, if, collaborating with other agencies, working to address some of the things that teachers are seeing in the classroom?
Absolutely. We created the Safe and Healthy School Division within the Agency of Education to ensure that we had the appropriate level of support to address the conditions that are going to make a school a welcoming environment, supportive of student learning, recognizing that involves understanding kind of the wraparound support that is provided. So the move towards creating safe and healthy schools is able to bring together those agency experts that support our most vulnerable students into one team so that they can have tighter collaboration. We do have a formalized process of how we coordinate with our sister agencies to identify the type of wraparound support that may be needed, and also to be clear around roles and responsibilities when in some cases it's not within the agency's jurisdiction, but we are aware of a challenge, or we're working with the superintendent to help connect them with the appropriate level of resources and services for that child. I met recently with the new commissioner of health to really talk also about the areas of intersection of our work, talking about school nursing, and also we had a good conversation around special education and providing the array of services that are needed, particularly with our students with autism, which we've identified within our special education report. And so I would say that's just a couple examples of the way in that recent weeks that we've been engaged in partnership with our agencies that coordinate with us on supporting mental health needs of students. And we really understand that this is a multifaceted approach. We're really talking about, yes, the hazing, harassment, and bullying. There's a model policy, but really what we're talking about is a prevention strategy that's also inclusive of, developing an overall school climate that is welcoming and nurturing of students as well. And then when there are needs that kind of exceed the capacity of the school, that there's a clear escalation point for how they will identify and connect them with their local regional agency. I'm not sure if that exactly answered your question.
Yes, that's helpful. That's very helpful. And again, I appreciate the focus that you and your colleagues have put toward, again, what I would consider the biggest priorities that schools and we are dealing with as a state. So thank you, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brian. Any other board member questions for the secretary? All right. Zoe, I appreciate all of the work.
Chair Samuelson.
Yes.
I just wanted to add a thank you to the agency as well for thinking ahead about AI. It's very, very meaningful. I'm saying this just because my team here at the WSD has just started brainstorming around it and thinking of forming a task force internally, and just to really stay on the safe side and utilize the platform wisely. With what the news I heard just now, I think I'm going to go ahead maybe and refrain my team to wait for the guidance coming from your office. I think that makes more sense. Based on that guidance, then maybe we can still have a task force, but not to deviate what's coming to us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's an area that we want to be coordinated as a state. So I have been participating in a national cohort of education leaders looking to implement AI responsibly. And it's been a really great opportunity for me to learn from other states and large districts that are in various levels of implementation around AI. So it's the guidance that we will be distributing is really informed by the work that we've been doing with our colleagues across the country, who are all grappling with the best way to leverage and harness the power and opportunity of AI while also ensuring we're safeguarding and our students against some of the negative ramifications of AI if it's not managed well and we don't establish the appropriate guardrails. So appreciate that, and more to come. We know that this is an area we need to have a very clear focus as a state. One thing we have decided to do is we're not going to have a separate initiative around AI, but we're really thinking about how AI supports our existing strategic plan, right? Really thinking thoughtfully around how we leverage it to achieve our vision, as opposed to having a separate vision for AI, really thinking about it as a tool. And as a tool, it will also come with some really clear parameters around how to use that tool, and thinking very concretely around data privacy and things of that nature that are really important for our schools, for our teachers, and for our students.
Thank you for that. And one other thing I wanted to add is the work around supporting students in understanding the terms we use, such as bullying, harassment, hazing. I know the high-level work is being done at the top level. Being on the field, I really want to see more education to the students around those terms, what they mean. If you go on the field, you hear students sometimes even, you have to really pay attention, and sometimes they are really say, oh, I was just joking about it. He's bullying me. And a staff member takes it seriously, and then it just ends up being like a joke in between friends, which can be concerning. So how can we, I'm not saying no school out there is doing this for their students, but I have a deep sense of there is no consistency around how to teach students around those terms. And we have ample opportunities to do that during advisory, for example, for those schools who have advisory, or morning meetings for those who provide those to their students. There is room really to incorporate it into our curriculum. It can even fit in SEL as well, social emotional learning. So I'm just saying we have room to do it, but how can we make it consistent so students are taught about this in the first place, which is already a great prevention around dealing with investigating about these terms when they happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think that just reinforces the importance of engaging the field as we are designing and developing this work. And so I've had conversations with superintendents alongside my interim director of Safe and Healthy Schools to really understand how this work is impacting students in classrooms. What are some of the strategies that have been deployed to help build greater awareness, not just of the terms, but around really how to engage or intervene when a student is saying something that could be quite offensive to another student, right? How do you take that also as a teaching and education moment? I've heard from a lot of superintendents that, you know, when they've heard something that's offensive that's been said, making sure that that's being named, but also using that as a teaching moment to explain why, right? And so we're engaging in those conversations. You know, the work of the advisory committee is really helping us to think around the policy and some of the prevention components, but there's additional work that is starting and needs to continue, to your point, around really engaging the field. And that's where we get into how things are actually operationalized. And so what you're flagging is there may even be inconsistencies in how we're defining those terms or how they're being used within a school setting or classroom by classroom. So thank you for lifting that and making sure that we're focusing on providing that consistency and continuity around how to engage in this really important work so that all of our students feel safe in school and that they can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, and Zoe, I was going to say earlier, I do like how the agency has developed the 5 pillars, and that you're really using that as a lens through which everything flows, you know, whether it's the organization of the agency or the work that's being done or the goals or, you know, measuring how you're doing. It's subtle in a way, but I think it's really powerful what you've done. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. We're being very thoughtful and intentional about being aligned and strategic with our work, so that we're clear on our priorities and that we're investing our time, energy, and resources to supporting the field in these areas that have been identified as most critical to moving the needle and supporting our students and teachers. So thank you.
Thanks. All right, so we are running a little bit ahead of schedule. We could take an early break, or I do believe we might have Stephanie Vogel with us. Is she? Yeah. So we could take up agenda item L, which is the WIDA language proficiency standard for English learners, if the board would like to do that, and then we'll take a break after agenda item L. So, okay. So without further ado, this agenda item, the secretary brought this before the board. That arises pursuant to the board's authority under 16 VSA section 164.9 to implement and periodically update standards for student learning in appropriate content areas from kindergarten to grade 12. Supervisory union boards shall use the standards as the basis for the development and selection of curriculum, methods of instruction, locally developed assessments, and the content and skills that are taught and learned in schools. So the board last considered proposed standards in the fall of 2024. And at its September 18th, 2024 meeting, the board approved a process for approving standards, such as the one that we have before us today. Steps include a presentation of the proposed standards to the full board and an opportunity for board members to ask questions. We'll be joined momentarily by Stephanie Vogel, the English Learners State Program Director, who will present this overview to the board and answer questions. At the conclusion of that discussion, board members will decide whether there is sufficient information about the standards for us to initiate our review, and if so, whether we will vote to approve the standards as proposed or whether to refer the standards to the Student Performance Standards Committee for further consideration. So that process was what the board approved at the September 2024 meeting, just kind of reminding everyone of what that process is, as well as, for our new members, letting you know. So we'll hear the presentation, and then there will be an inflection point where we can decide, if we want to vote to adopt the standards or if we want to refer it to the Student Performance Standards Committee. So with no further ado, I will look to Stephanie. Welcome, and thank you for your time this morning and your flexibility for letting us scoot you up on the agenda.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So appealing to the technology gods today. Do you see, let's see. Are you able to see my slides?
Loading.
It's loading. Yep. Now we can see them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. As Ms. Samuelson said, I am coming from the Agency of Education. I'm in the functional priority area of academics in the Curriculum and Instruction Division, and I am the Multilingual English Learner Programs Director. In addition, I bring the lens of differentiated instruction. I also am proud to represent Vermont on the board of the National Association of English Language Program Administrators, where I'm the president-elect. My presidency starts in July. And we were lucky to have Dr. Kobe present at one of our national events. She spoke to our very progressive tiered funding formula for multilingual learners, and it was a very well-received presentation that I keep getting questions about. And that funding formulas in the new Act 73. I'd also like to acknowledge that my colleague Heidi Jo Bartlett is here from the Assessment Division. She helped write the document that we submitted, the green sheet, and she is my thought partner in all things multilingual learners. The agency, I couldn't do my job without her. And I see that she was able to join us. I think she's here now. What is WIDA? So WIDA was formed in 2003 in response to the No Child Left Behind Act that started to front the needs of multilingual learners in statute. And so it's a consortium of 42 states, territories, and governments that provide a comprehensive, standards-based, aligned approach to teaching, assessment, screening, research, and instructional materials. And we've been a member of the consortium since 2004. We're one of the longest standing members, I think the 5th longest standing member of the consortium. And Vermont educators have been involved in all of the work of WIDA since then. We have some active involvement now, including some WIDA fellows operating out of some of our school districts. And Heidi Jo and I also have positions on some of the subcommittees at WIDA, including research, national policy, and assessment design. So the English Language Development Standards Framework that I'm pitching here has 4 components, and these are the 4 components that interact with each other in order to help develop English language proficiency. And I think most interesting about the WIDA standards is that they are fully aligned with other content standards that you have already enacted. So they're language for social and instructional purposes, language for English language arts, language for mathematics, language for science, and language for social studies. So there's full alignment across the curriculum for English language development in an academic way. The key language uses are a genre-based approach. So it looked at all of those content areas and determined that these are the 4 ways in which English language is used in those content areas. And then there are language expectations. It's a little hard to read this document, but if you can see that there are examples of language that can be used to meet each of the standards that are lined above. So there's a grade level standard. And then this is language for English language arts. And then they have some English language proficiency items and then language examples that could be employed in lesson planning, for example. And then they have proficiency level descriptors that determine the English language proficiency level of students. And this is the proficiency level descriptors that define kind of the funding formula that we have in Act 73. Interesting to note here is that we consider students to be proficient at the beginning of level 5. So we have the highest exit criteria for English learner status, and that is a 5.0 comprehensive score on the assessment. And so that means level 5 and level 6 are considered beyond fluent, so more than meeting proficiency. So there is a way to use these standards to address students who have never been identified as multilingual learners. So it's an interesting way of looking at the need for English language proficiency, not only for identified English learners, but for all students in the system. So why am I bringing this to you now? Why are we bringing this to you now? The requirement to have approved and adopted English language proficiency standards have been a requirement since No Child Left Behind in 2001. So we have been out of compliance since then. We have been operating with these standards as our de facto standards as we are assessing against them. So the most recent articulation of the requirement is in ESSA in 2015, and you can read there the actual language of the statute. In addition, we are undergoing federal peer review of our assessment system, and there are critical elements that we're required to provide evidence for, and there are 2 critical elements related to English language proficiency standards, and we're required to provide evidence that we have formally adopted these standards as part of the assessment peer review. I know Heidi Jo has spent some time looking into the peer review now, and this year the assessment is fully aligned with the 2020 standards. They had been embedded field testing over the last several years, and so we're going to be required to go through another peer review process for the latest iteration of this assessment. So this is a really key time and to formally adopt in order to show critical element 1.1 that says the state has formally adopted K-12 ELP standards for all English learners in public schools. But that's the compliance reason. But I think now is a really exciting time to think about other reasons to adopt English language proficiency standards. And I like to think of this roots and wings framing of our statewide vision. English learners often struggle to feel the sense of rootedness in our community, and also be given the wings to succeed. And I think embedding and integrating English learners into the system formally is one way of showing them that they are rooted in our community and can have this experience of developing roots and wings. And that can be shown through our strategic pillars, but I think it's best heard from the perspective of a student. So I'd like your permission to show a video. And here we are with the technology. Here's hoping this works.
And of course, that's fine.
Yes, okay. So let me stop sharing for a moment so I can open a link. Are you still seeing the PowerPoint?
We are, it says the new boy, and then there's the screen below it is blank.
Okay, I'm going to open an additional link here. All right, so let me make sure I'm sharing sound. All right, here goes.
He was new at school. Everyone spoke English, but he didn't understand anything. He often sat alone, watching others laugh and talk. It made him sad, like he was different, like he didn't exist. One day, he said to himself, I want to understand. I want to speak like them. So he started to dedicate himself to bettering his English. At school, he was hard. He made many mistakes. Sometimes he felt ashamed, but he kept going. Every day a new word, every day a small victory. Then one morning he realized he understood what the teacher was saying. He could answer, he could finally speak. Now he felt confident, he laughed with others, he even helped new students because he knows how it feels to be alone. Thank you for listening to this story. This was the story of Ode Madiem, the story of a student who didn't understand this new language, English. This story reminds us that no matter where we come from or what language we speak, with passion and courage, everything can change. Never give up.
So Rudy created that video as part of a summer school project, and with the help of a Career Technical Center's digital media program. I find that very impactful, and it helps explain the importance of English language learner programming in all of our schools. Okay. To the PowerPoint. But also, I think adoption of these standards directly relates to the work that we're doing around our strategic plan and the pillars in our plan. For academics, having English language development standards creates a clarity of purpose and a coherence. And integrated English language development can benefit all students. I think we have an exciting opportunity moving on to the second pillar, which is the college and career readiness. I think we have a real opportunity with the new graduation standards to create alignment as we're pinning standards to the actual academic standards onto the graduation requirements, that we could include English language development standards as part of that process to integrate it across the system. Then for pillar 3, for safe and healthy schools, as I showed you in the video, the student is needing to feel a sense of belonging. I think multilingual learners are often subject to hazing, harassment, and bullying, and more integration into the educational system will help prevent some of that from happening, that othering that they experience. For operational effectiveness, pillar 4, the data reporting is going to be more aligned now that the WIDA 2020 standards are fully integrated into the assessment that we're using. I think also for the accountability side of things, English language learners represent a very large proportionate share of the calculations we use to identify schools for continued supports. So I think if we have more formal adoption of standards and more integration across the educational system, those students will be better supported in helping us meet our goals related to our accountability measures. And then I think it speaks to itself that being able to differentiate supports for special education and for students with language needs beyond English language learners, these standards would help support students in that way. Some of the work that we've been doing at the agency is we've been partnering with UVM on a research project where we have been visiting LEAs with between 10 and 25 tested English learners to review their English learner plans and to interview their EL specialists, their supervisors, superintendents, and classroom teachers. And we're doing, so far we visited 10 LEAs and we have another 4 to go. And what we've been finding is that there's an inconsistent understanding of the standards and how they should be used in lessons, not just for the English learner specialists, but across the system. English language development does not happen in short bursts of input from an English language specialist once or twice a week. It needs to happen throughout the day. So there needs to be some kind of understanding of English language development for all teachers who work with these students. And again, there is a benefit to including English language development standards in general instruction. As kind of a pilot of this, with our science specialists in the academics division, Catherine Rossman, who's pictured here talking about the next generation science standards, and Pat Fitzsimmons, we held a science and English learner collaboration training. When we put the registration out, it oversold in one day, so we are having to have a second cohort of people. And you can see here that we had a sold out house. This was the day after a snowstorm too, so I feel really proud that this event went off as it did. And I think a lot of important things happened in this training as we did talk about the coordination of next generation science standards and the English language development standards and how English language specialists can work with the science specialists to help support multilingual learners in the science classroom. But I thought a real impactful takeaway from one of our science teachers is this quote here from Ben Lord. He's a science teacher at Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union, and I'll give you a chance to read that. And I think that's a pretty nice place to end. I've expanded on all of this in the green sheet that I submitted with this proposal. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have in the meantime.
Stephanie, thank you. I do have a question. You had mentioned with the peer review and critical element 1.1, and I'm just curious, when is, I mean, I know this is an ongoing review, but when is this proof of compliance required?
Hey, Joe, take it away.
We're obviously, as you said, it's cyclical, so we're in the process of a never-ending round of these. We have to submit the next one. So right now we're in a testing session, so we have to submit it next year about this time. So before next testing session, we'll start.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we've written that we've de facto adopted these standards because this is what we're tested against, but without a formal adoption, they could come back and ding us again and say, well, you haven't really though, have you?
And are there alternatives to this plan? I mean, this seems like a really thoughtfully laid out one. I don't want to suggest that I'm not in favor of it. I'm just curious.
There are a few different set of standards. I guess the one with the second largest number of states would be ELPA 21. They have a very different set of standards. They just have 10 that are much more general, not as detailed as these. California and Texas have their own as well, but I'm not as familiar with how those standards are set up in their assessment systems, just that they're different than the WIDA ones.
There are only 2 consortia, and the rest are states that have the capacity to build their own assessment systems. So really, from Vermont's perspective, we only have WIDA or ELPA 21 to choose from. Heidi Jo, we're fortunate to have her because she has worked with both assessment systems. She comes from a state that used ELPA 21, so she can speak to the difference between the ELPA 21 standards and the WIDA standards.
I think there's only 6 states that use the ELPA 21 as their set of standards. And then I said California and Texas have separate ones. And then starting next year, New York has adopted the WIDA set of assessments for their assessment system. So New York is transitioning from their independent one to being part of the WIDA consortium as well. If anybody wants exact numbers, I can get those for you.
Other board member questions?
Hey, I want to say thank you to Stephanie and Heidi, working very closely to you. I trust all you provide, and I'm very appreciative of what you do. I have a few questions, maybe. Looking at the WIDA proficiency level descriptors makes me think of other state assessments, such as VTCAP. For a meaningful data, a less confusing data to educators, especially those who are not ELL or ML trained, to scaffold the learning, you need some tangible data to inform instruction, right? So how come ELL students are taking all other standardized assessment per se, but not the other way around?
Yes, it is an inequity in the way that the federal guidelines are designed, and that EL students are required to take an annual English language proficiency assessment, and no other students are required to take it, but English learners are required to take all the other statewide assessments. So the testing season for an EL student goes on for months.
Which is okay.
Yeah.
Which is okay, but still, just to get that tangible data so everyone understand it. I wish in my dream world, I would created a rubric that cross-check all the standards, make one that could inform any educator, whether you are ELL or not ELL, to understand where a student stands. For you as an educator, teacher, to scaffold or inform instruction from there on to really support the learners. Without that, it's really complicated. It's really hard.
Yes, it's a big challenge for general classroom teachers to have the understanding and the expertise of how a student who is not fully proficient in English is able to access the curriculum and what they are able to show with the language they have in an English language classroom. So some states, like I think the full embedding of language aims into our statewide graduation requirements and the standards that we're using would be a place where we could start microdosing professional learning around how to serve multilingual learners to help them meet our graduation standards. I have the fortune of being able to work with the team that's going to talk about the accessibility of our graduation standards for all students. And I know that out of that will come, I'm sure, quite a lot of professional learning around that. And I think one of the areas that we could focus on is exactly what you're talking about, how to make classrooms understanding more about what English language proficiency, how it affects your ability to show ability in science and math and English and social studies.
Thank you. The second and last, so I give other room to comment or ask question, is I'm not gonna lie, I get frustrated when I think of students that are monitored. For those, to put in context, an ELL student who is monitored is an ELL student who has successfully passed the reader test. Then they are monitored for the next or the following 2 years. So when I think of what it entails to monitor a student, it becomes complicated because these monitored students are not accounted for when it comes to funding purposes.
In Act 73, they are.
Say again?
In the new Act 73, the funding formula that I was speaking about earlier that Dr. Colby presented at NALPA, there is funding for monitored students included in the new funding formula. And there's an additional weight for students who are experiencing significantly interrupted education as well. So SLIFE students, there is a weight for SLIFE students as well in the new funding formula.
I've never heard it anyone. I'm glad I asked. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very much needed because it requires a lot of work to actually in practice monitor a student. Thank you so much.
I'm going to add just a little bit as well. These WIDA standards really focus on academic language. Yes, there is one set of the standards that focus on social and emotional learning, but the other four rather, really do focus on the academic language. And as I think anybody that has experience with, education, as we all do, learning how to speak an academic English is very different than learning how to speak, classroom, in the lunchroom and with your friends. And so bringing these academic language standards to the forefront really helps all of our students if teachers get their eyes on these and realize what are some of the focus points that I can concentrate on in increasing that academic vocabulary and sentence structures that we really want all of our students to have to be able to be successful in the academic world.
Yeah, and further to that, the assessment assesses 4 domains: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And with our focus on literacy and disciplinary literacy across the disciplines, these standards are really where we could focus that attention so that teachers really understand that all of them are teachers of English and literacy, and that those standards are kind of the bridge between content area standards and the fact that they are teaching language. It's kind of a nice alignment there between those two things.
Thank you, boss. I think we have 2 hands up. You have Colby and Tom. Colby, Tammy is first.
Hey, Stephanie. Hey, Eddie. Thanks
Hi.
for the presentation. It's nice to see you guys. One question I have for you is, so we have the new standards that we're going to put in place. Can you talk to me a little bit about what the data infrastructure at AOE sort of is going to look like with respect to those standards? Because I know one of the issues that's come up is actually being able to implement the formula and being able to track kids against sort of where they are on these standards. And I think it just sort of in thinking about the big picture, I think that would be helpful. The other thing is Mohammed, just to clarify, the SLIFE funding for the interrupted educational students is over and above the additional weight for English language based on proficiency. So that's important for places like Winooski. But I'm curious about the data.
Yeah, so as far as the data is concerned, we have the proficiency level data of students in the system. So they take the assessment and we have their proficiency level. The wording of the finance formula, though, since we don't test after 5.0, there is a weight for 5 and 6. So I think we would just call that monitor year 1 and monitor year 2, and we can calculate that in our current data system. The one place where I think the data we need to come up with a definition of, a formal definition of, and a way of collecting that information is what does it mean to be a student with significantly or a limited or interrupted formal education? What does that mean and how do we count for it? And then how do we collect that data at the state level? That is the hardest part of that funding formula for us currently.
And how does that definitional consideration fit with what the state board is being asked to do with taking care of the standards, right? So is that something that we should be considering as we are adopting standards? Should we be working with you to define that? Is that something that you're doing administratively, right? I'm just trying to think about it, just sort of how does that all work, right?
I am not sure how definitions are determined. Is that determined by the legislature or by the school board? Zoe, do you know?
I think it's got to be a rule.
Yeah, so I'd say they're two separate. So one is for the state board to review and approve the standards. And then what you're noting is that there's a new classification that will be incorporated in the funding. We named that last year, that this would require a separate data collection. So that is noted on the radar and is something that we need to account for when we transition to the new funding formula.
But we're not considering. So the WIDA standards deal with the proficiency levels 1 through 5, and so that's the standards. So since the standards don't cover SLIFE, right? The standards that we're considering now don't cover SLIFE. So I think my question is should we, as we're thinking about standards, be defining SLIFE in the context of those standards so they're all in one place and all one sort of work together, or are we talking about these are standards for the 5 levels and that SLIFE is going to be handled separately?
I think they should talk to each other because my suspicion is most definition of SLIFE will include a proficiency level, right? Like
that's what I'm
think
thinking.
in many states it's students who have a 2.0 or below plus some other metric, not having been in formal education for the last 3 years or some other defining.
And the standards that you just reviewed with us do not include that piece right now. So that would be something that if we were going to embed in the standards, we would need to do before the state board passed the standards as you've recommended, correct? Okay, that was kind of how I was thinking about it. I think we have something else we have to do before we can pass these. If we're going to make sure that these are all together.
I think that the standards we would use like an academic English language proficiency focused way for SLIFE students would be the same set of standards we would use for all of our English learners.
Right.
We would just recognize, that the SLIFE students need some additional supports in other ways.
Heidi, I think what I'm saying is you all have done a good job of sort of giving us an overview and bringing before the board sort of the WIDA standards that tie to the 5 levels of proficiency, but they don't include SLIFE, right? And so if we were going to have if the standards were going, if the definitional aspects of of SLIFE invoked the standards, it needs to be part of that conversation, and it's not part of it's not included right now. I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's just something we got to do before we officially pass the standards. So, okay, that's helpful.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? Because I think this is definitely a piece that we need to contemplate with regard to the funding formula. So what I'm hearing though is clarity around who would be defined as SLIFE, right? It's like really the definition for SLIFE and that eligibility criteria that's going to be important for the funding formula.
Well, and that was my question to Stephanie. Zoe, I think there's the funding formula, but to the extent that we are talking about SLIFE meeting certain proficiency standards, right? Like what is, right? Like we have sort of the interrupted nature of it, but you also have the language proficiency piece of it, right? And that has to be clearly defined And my question is that, should that be part of the standards, right? Or is this, is it gonna go someplace else, or is this an and in both? That's what I'm asking, because it's unclear to me whether or not we need to be talking about SLIFE in the context of the standards you just presented.
Yeah, understood. So I think it's an action item for us to come forward with a proposal to the committee around this particular point, and knowing that they do need to talk to each other, but there's also kind of separate, there's some areas of this that are separate. So let us kind of take this away and then come back to the committee. Because I think this is part of the process that's really good, right? We come to the whole board, we give an overview. Yeah, get us some questions. So this helps us to narrow in on where the questions are, and we can bring that to the standards committee for the different recommended options of how to proceed. So I appreciate you flagging it.
I do think that means we can't vote on the standards today as a board, right? That it looks like, Jennifer, it looks like this is going to need to go to the standards. That's what I'm trying to figure out is, like, are we in a position to vote on these, or is there still another piece that we got to talk about? And it sounds like there may be another piece we got to talk about.
Well,
So if we've got to talk about it, then I think it's got to go to the standards committee.
That's what Zoe seems to be saying too.
Yeah. That's why I'm asking the question. I don't actually think it's a big deal, and the standards are great.
Yeah, I don't think it will delay us, but I think just for peace of mind and due diligence, including this as one agenda item on the standards committee, I think we can resolve this and make sure we all have clarity and feel comfortable. So I don't think that this will create a big delay, but I think it's warranted to have a fuller conversation with the committee.
Could we, I know we've got a lot going on, but could we do this on a time frame that allows the standards committee to take this up in its February meeting is what I'm thinking about, just because that's going to be a busy committee with the class size. And I know we want to get this buttoned down. And so
what I'm hearing is it's a narrow question that we can respond to at the committee at the February meeting, so that we could bring it back to the board upon your recommendation for a vote.
Yeah, and Stephanie, you and I can talk more about this, and so I can help frame this out. But I do think, Jennifer, that means we're not going to be in a position to vote on these today. I think there's an additional piece that we got to deal with out here, but I think we can deal with it quickly.
I agree with you. I think we're going to vote to put it to the committee, but I'm going to let Tom go first.
Yeah, that was my question. That was why I was asking those questions. I was trying to figure out whether or not what we had in front of us had all the pieces in it, or whether or not we needed to, there may be something else we need to consider. And it sounds like we do need to consider that small piece. I think it'll go quickly, but I think we got to figure that piece out. And to Zoe's point, it does have implications for implementation of Act 73. Like, there are broader there are implications on the standards side, but what we do there also has implications for implementation of 73, which was also why I was asking about the data on the back end. So I think we got to make sure all those pieces work together. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. First, I just want to thank you for this work. As somebody who led this kind of work as head of school, I know that it's demanding work. And I also know that it's hard to get teachers trained in order to implement it. That's a major lift. But Heidi, it sounds like you're the expert here, and I am not familiar with ELBA 21. And so maybe you could speak to, because I obviously haven't done a deep dive on either of these.
Yep.
Can you speak to the advantages of the WIDA standards over ELBA 21?
Having worked in both systems, so where I worked at previously was in Nebraska, which is an ELPA 21 state. It's English Language Proficiency Assessment 21, like for the 21st century. It can get a little confusing because English Language Proficiency Assessment is also the general term for having to do these under federal, regulations. But so that's the ELPA 21. And I grew up in Wisconsin. I was educated in Wisconsin and got my teaching certification there, and that was also a WIDA state. What I really enjoy about the WIDA system is the amount of professional development that they provide, but also the details that they provide for the different grade bands, as well as for the detailed information about like what type of academic language we're looking for. It provides information at the vocabulary level, at the sentence level, and at the discourse level. So, paragraphs, essays, extended conversations, beyond. So I do enjoy, and I think it's I think it provides a really good framework to, well, if somebody doesn't have any knowledge of like how English grammar and, you know, the grammatical system works, it can be a little bit dense, I will admit that. But for teachers that have to take this and then apply it to their teachings, I think it provides a lot of good information. It as detailed as they want to get. And so how can I provide information about this at the vocabulary level? How can I, you know, start introducing this if I'm having a conversation? It also looks at the, you know, receptive and productive language skills. So like, is the student producing the language or taking in the language? So it really does break it down in a variety of ways that depending on the needs of the teacher or classmates or doing curriculum development, we can start incorporating these in either little chunks or use it even as a basis for an entire unit and incorporating it in a bigger way. But there's flexibility into how much we go in, or we could implement it little by little, bit by bit. We don't have to say you have to change everything. It's more of a system where this is what you have been doing, but we're going to add a little bit here at the beginning, or we're going to add a little bit of explanation here, or we're going to give a student a chance to speak and using these new vocabulary words here, where they don't have to overhaul what they've been doing, but rather they can incorporate it into what they have been doing.
And how is that different from ELPA 21?
ELPA 21 is a little bit more general. There's a lot, as I said, there's 10 big standards. The grade bands are similar. They're done on a 5-level scale instead of a 6-level scale. So the proficiency levels are scored a little bit differently. They also have an alternate content assessment as well as the standard content assessment. The alternate content or the alternate English language proficiency assessment is for students with significant cognitive disabilities. The grade bands are similar.
That with WIDA as well.
Yes, yes.
So
With
WIDA
WIDA, we
also
have
has
those.
alternate.
Yes, WIDA, yes. I meant to say that they both have those. But the two systems, although similar in many ways, they're not, you can't transfer information. So if I see a student has a 3.2 in an ELPA state, that doesn't correlate to a 3.2 in a WIDA state. There are different assessment systems and different set of standards. They both test reading, speaking, listening, and writing. They both test the same grades. The time length for testing is very similar, but the standards themselves are different. I can provide websites if you want more information on them. Just don't want to overwhelm.
Thank you.
Any other board member comments or questions before I pivot here? I'm not hearing any. So just to go back to the process that the board has approved, we had our presentation. Thank you to Stephanie and Heidi Jo, I'm sorry. That was a lot of information, and really appreciate you guys taking a deep dive on this with the board. So I think I'm going to say, unless anyone disagrees with me, that there is sufficient information about the standards for us to initiate our review. And I think what I would do at this point is entertain a motion that the Student Performance Standards Committee consider the proposed WIDA English Language Development Standards Framework 2020 edition that were presented to the board today, and to develop recommendations for the full board to consider pursuant to 16 VSA section 164.9. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion for you, but I won't repeat it.
I could if I had to. Thank you, Rich. Is there a second?
I could second.
Oh, I saw Tom first.
Oh, Tom, you go first. Tom, you can give more work to us.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the motion, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please raise your hand, signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. And Tammy, I heard you say February.
Stephanie, can you and I find some time in the next week or so just to chat, and then we can, I think we will update the February Standards Committee agenda to take it up.
Okay. And Tammy, remind me, it's February what, the meeting?
second Tuesday of February.
Tuesday of February. Perfect. All right.
February 10th.
Thank you. All right, thank you all. This was a really good conversation, and I look forward to coming back at our February meeting. Maybe if we're ready, we'll vote this out.
And Jennifer, I just want to formally recognize the great work Stephanie's doing, and not just for the state of Vermont, but on the national stage. She is a true gem and a leader in this area. So we are really, really lucky to have her here in Vermont doing this great work. So I've seen her in action. I've also met colleagues of hers around the country who recognize her leadership and just all of the contributions that she's making. So yeah, Mohammed, right? Yeah, Stephanie. There you go. She's amazing. Yeah, Lori.
All right, thank you. Okay, we are now super off schedule. Can we take a 5-minute quick break with my apologies, because I'm sure we have Aaron and Gwen with us already. Here's a question. I'm going to put Aaron on the spot. Would it be okay with you if we have Gwen first and then take you up? Maybe Aaron's not here yet.
Sure, I can be flexible with that.
Just so that we have one person who's way off schedule and not two people who are way off schedule. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. We will come back here. We'll start with Gwen Carmoli, the chair of the Advisory Council on Literacy at 10:50, and then Aaron, we will take you up after that. So everyone can turn off their cameras, and I will see you here. Let's be back here to start promptly at 10:50, please. Thanks. If other board members are back and you still have your camera off, just let me know. I see Brian is back. Do we have anyone else who's back? Tammy's back. Okay, so we've got 1, 2,
Hey, Gwen.
3, 4. Okay, and Cynthia's back. Great. All right, so we are back. I'm going to take up where we left off.
Hello.
So we now are joined by Gwen Carmoli, the chair of the Advisory Council on Literacy. So as the board knows, and it's in the agenda packet, we received the Advisory Council's 2025 report. And just to frame this agenda item, the Advisory Council on Literacy was created by Act 28 of 2021 and was designed to advise the Agency of Education, the State Board of Education, and the General Assembly on how to improve proficiency outcomes in literacy for students in pre-kindergarten through grade 12 and how to sustain those outcomes. So Gwen has put together the annual report and presented it to the board, and I invited her to join us today just to review the findings and then have a discussion about where we go from here. So Gwen, welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here on this chilly morning. I'm looking outside my window. I'm in Colchester. I'm director of curriculum in Colchester School District, and I'm seeing the most beautiful sunshine and aware that it's very chilly out there. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I have a short presentation, and I am along the way always willing to answer questions. And at the end, I know Jen had asked if we could have some time for questions at the end. Really, this is an annual update of the work that's been happening with the Advisory Council on Literacy. And what is challenging about a report is that we have to write what was completed in the past year up to the point that we were writing the report and that the council had heard. So you're going to see in the report there was information about NAEP, and NAEP had, at that point, we only had the NAEP 2022 results. Since that time, we have the 2024 results, but the council has just barely seen them. It happened after the report was completed, and we are about to receive our VITCAP presentation in the upcoming month. So just so you know, there's a little delay in what the report is and what the information on the ground is. The Advisory Council on Literacy, as Jen was saying, was set up by Act 28 and then was continued by Act 139. And it set a focus on early literacy, which was really around this effort that has been a Vermont effort for about 2 decades of getting students, every student, to read on grade level by grade 3. It put a really high focus on those early literacy years in order to have successful readers in future grades and beyond school. It was acknowledging that there were increasingly large achievement gaps, particularly for students experiencing poverty and students with disabilities. And it outlined a set of tasks that we would work on as an advisory council. With Act 28, there were 8 meetings per year, up to 8 meetings per year. With Act 139, as it got continued, it's the same tasks, but it reduced the number of meetings that we can have in a year. They set up to 4 meetings per year. You notice on the chart that's available, we zoomed our way through the tasks, but there's more work to be done on those tasks. And so the far right-hand column, Act 139, tells you what the council is doing for those, even though it's the same task, what the next step might be or how we're going about that work. So an example of that on right in the middle, provide recommendations for services for school districts around implementation, around the literacy plan and staffing needs. We did make recommendations with our Act 28 work, and we are continuing to monitor that and provide updated recommendations in each year. So that's a little orientation around the council. Just also to let you know, there are 19 members on the council. We had 14 and it got expanded with Act 139. We have representation across the state from the what I call the V's, the superintendents, the school board association, the Vermont Principals Association, the Vermont Teachers Association, the Vermont NEA. We have the Vermont curriculum leaders. I'm the representative for the Vermont curriculum leaders. We have teachers. We have a role for a student. It is not filled at this time. It will be filled in the near future. Literacy experts, higher education. So we have a wide range of expertise and varied perspectives. And every person is serving as a representative of an organization or a constituency group. So they may have individual ideas, but really they are there representing that organization. And then we take that into consideration when we make the recommendations. Everyone is bringing forward their recommendations, and then we vote recommendations forward. We've rooted our work in evidence-based resources, and a shift that happened in the last 8 years is the federal guidelines went from research-based to evidence-based. So it said that everything is rooted in research, but it's what are the most effective practices, particularly in the area of literacy. And in our case, the focus is on early literacy. The National Reading Panel from the year 2000 was probably the most important of the starting place for our work. It identified the big 5 areas of fluency, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And then there are a number of sites that are linked there that give us information about what are the most effective practices based on the evidence-based, the research that shows highest efficacy. So the Institute for Educational Sciences, IES, they have practice guides where are meta-analyses on a content area and then a grade span. The Cedar Center, which is part of the Florida Center for Reading Research, that has a particular focus on support services and special education. The Ed Reports, which takes a look at what are effective programs that are aligned to our state standards. We did include the Vermont Agency of Education. They've been really working hard on their evidence-based resources. The one particular article we've been working on based on a Vermont expert, Louisa Motes, who's an international expert on early literacy, teaching reading is rocket science. And it's actually, it was 2020, and then she had an updated version in 2022. And then in the right-hand bottom of your screen, you might see the state policy levers. That has been an important one for us to think about. What are those big things that we think about that go from a small instructional practice of evidence-based instruction to what are big statewide practices that we can use. And so that has been a guide for us. Just a little visual of the timeline from 2020. 2021, Act 28 was adopted in the spring of 2021. It established the Advisory Council on Literacy. It gave a set of powers and duties, and it focused on that early literacy, those grades K to 3. In 2024, a new literacy law was added, which required, so the Act 28 really gave funds and the focus for the early literacy work. It gave funds to the agency, established the council, started to create some opportunities for some grant dollars across the state. Act 139 gave a law that said there's a requirement for universal screening for those early grades, parental notification, evidence-based supplemental instruction, some professional development that was needed, and then data collection. Shortly after that law was passed, the statute 2903, which is the statute around early literacy, was updated, and there was a portion that had been there previously, which had a continuation for grade 4 and then grades 5 and beyond for supplemental reading, needs-based supplemental reading. And that was removed based on Act 139. There was a request and some legislation that worked through that said, can we amend that to bring that back to restore that that focus on K to 3 early literacy and restore that after grade 3, if you're having a needs-based, if you're having evidence-based problems, if you're showing that you have a need for supplemental education, that there's a requirement that is on the books that gets added back in. So last spring, through Act 72, the Miscellaneous Education Act, they updated that language. The other thing that got updated was literacy assessment. A new statute was added that aligned with Act 139. So there's been a lot of movement in a short period of time on literacy. Just to give you an overview of what those statutes are and rules are, these are linked, so inside your presentation you can go to them. And I made note that the updated statute 2903 got updated and based on the Miscellaneous Education Act from last spring. 2907, that assessment and intervention, was added in there. And then Act 72 of 2025 was new, which was making those updates possible.
Hey, babe.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, did someone have a question?
You and I did some good work. You know, they updated us on lead, which something we worked on how long ago. I'm getting the literacy update now. You know,
Brian?
and I love how
Brian, you're not muted.
When you use AI or whatever, how they describe the act that we put together.
Thank you. Okay. So over the course of time from Act 28 and Act 139, we have developed recommended highlights of that work, or developed recommendations. So I created a slide that just gave you an overview of that. One of our biggest recommendations is provide guidance and resources that are rooted in evidence-based practices. Some of that means to go in and revise some existing documents that are there. The blueprint, the blueprint for literacy for the state, we went through the whole document and we've recommended some particular sections. The agency will work on that. We've made recommendations around literacy instruction, provide an instructional guide for literacy instruction, particularly early literacy, because that's the focus of our work. What does phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary instruction look like? That's systematic and explicit instruction that is aligned to evidence-based research and the science of reading. That body of research and evidence that's showing what works for teaching early literacy and for a struggling reader in other grades. We've also recommended that we expand beyond the focus of K to 3. it is really important that we have early literacy in place, but it is equally important that if you have a student who is struggling in any grade, that student needs intervention as quickly as possible. So we need to have resources related to that and professional learning. And then we've been thinking about this piece about the culturally responsive piece. In order to close achievement gaps, you not only have to do the instructional pieces, you have to make sure that the instruction is culturally relevant and that we have materials and resources. And I will say that the Agency of Education has done a tremendous job of updating resources, adding resources, creating guidance on assessment, on screening tools, on instruction. They just released the literacy toolkit, which is terrific. That so much information is available right now. And they've been working with some outside organizations and monitoring other departments of education or state agencies to see what's available. And then every month we get updates on literacy, and then they are updating their resources on their website. This year, as we were scrambling through our 4 meetings, 3 recommendations surfaced and were voted represented in our report. We recommended providing funding for resources. The agency is working, I would say, probably beyond capacity. We really need the General Assembly to provide resources so that the resource of funding, and I would say multi-year funding, so that it is not just a one-time, this needs to be a continued effort. Provide funding, multi-year funding for resources for school systems, and so that the agency has the ability to do that work. They did receive funding for staffing, and through ESSER funds, they were able to use dollars dedicated to literacy. But the recommendation of the Advisory Council on Literacy is that the General Assembly provide funding so that the agency can get resources out to school systems. They're also really recommending this piece about providing professional learning opportunities. And that might be professional learning, could be videos, on-demand videos. It could be opportunities that are in person. It could be coaching. All of those pieces of professional learning that make a difference and need to be equally available no matter the school system or the corner of the state that you're in. And then it's very important that we've done so much work on the early literacy. Make sure that as we're thinking about literacy and the needs of students in any grade, that we are continuing to support Act 139 in those early literacy efforts. School systems are putting screeners in place and starting that data collection and that connection to the parents with the parent notification. But if we lose sight of that, a lot of important work is going to stall out and may get replaced with something else. So we really need that continued support. I think the most important thing happening, and we hear this at the beginning of every meeting, I always ask some sort of opening question, which is around some sort of update. It might be around a resource you're using, some shift that's happening, and some sort of positive sharing. And what we're hearing is every school system and representative is working on it, who is related to the council, all the organizations, everyone's working on this in some way. There's this energy and excitement around improving our literacy instruction in order to improve our outcomes. This collective efficacy, John Hattie, who's a researcher who collects data and does meta-analyses, says this is one of the highest evidence-based practices. He says when you look at effect size, and anything over a 0.4 is in that, he calls it the zone of desired effect. It's a highly effective practice. And when you get way past a 0.4, you're getting more than a year's growth. That's really, really exciting. Collective efficacy is us all working together with a common purpose. We might be doing it in slightly different ways, but that collective efficacy of all these organizations and all this effort by the General Assembly, by the Agency of Education, by the Advisory Council, and every school system and teacher who's working on this, that's our collective will toward making this happen. And it's a highly effective practice. So to me, incredibly exciting. We are right on the edge, I think, of some really good news. You know, we saw a little bit of improvement in our VitCap scores and literacy. That was exciting. You know, there's a ton of work for us to happen, but in the classrooms and on the ground, we are seeing this happen. And I believe that it's going to turn into improved outcomes. I'm just going to close by thinking about this. One of the reasons we had this goal is really to create opportunities for every one of our students. This is an equity issue. It's an issue that we want every student to have an opportunity and every student to move past, to be able to read and successfully apply their written and reading and written knowledge to the world. Literacy is critically important to every one of our students and the opportunities that they have in school and beyond school. Frederick Douglass said this very, very eloquently many years ago, and he was talking about the freedom of African Americans and Blacks. I would say it's the freedom of every one of our students and this importance of how do we increase opportunity for every student in Vermont. Hugely important. So I'm going to pause and ask if you have any questions.
Great. Gwen, thank you so much. The presentation really helped in terms of, you know, bringing out the salient points of the written report. And I know every slide is always the tip of an iceberg, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Board members, do you have any questions about the report or the work of the Advisory Council on Literacy?
I have one.
I have one. Brian, please go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Mohammed.
Go, my honor.
Okay. Thank you. And you know, this consistency, I'll just say, is so important. In other words, you know, I know Gwen's been working on this for a long time, and I so appreciate that consistency and the effort that she and Secretary Saunders and others are putting into this. And I mean, I would love for the governor, you know, at some point to highlight all of this work, because I think it's really important. It's really important as progress is being made, that Vermonters know that the agency and the administration, educators, people across the state are all collectively working together to make what I think is an immense impact. So this is just a thank you to everybody involved, Gwen, Secretary Saunders, others on your team. So thank you.
Well, thanks for the kind words. And I appreciate all the work you gave and support you gave in Senate Education that helped us move this forward.
Thanks. Mohammed?
Thank you, Brian. I cannot state it the way you did. Very much appreciate the work done. Gwen, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, while I appreciate the presentation, I have been struggling for a while, and I have consulted many curriculum directors or spoken with many teachers around how our students are graded. Here's an example. Let's think about writing, for example. Are there clear metrics just solely to Vermonters, educators, to grade our students? When we talk about writing, what is in writing that need to be not ignored while grading?
You just cut out for me, Mohammed.
I did not do anything.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
All right, so you were asking about grading, particularly in the area of writing. Are there any?
As a one example only.
Okay.
When I think about writing as an educator, I would think about anything that is incorporated within the writing. Let's say about spelling, for example. Is the spelling graded by a teacher whom is grading writing? As an
Well, what
example, not to go
Yeah,
deeper into other skills.
Well, I would say, and that you're really hitting on something that's been some of the most heartening of the national work of late has been moving, raising the importance of the early literacy, those foundational skills, and then moving from that into deep learning, deep thinking, reading, writing, going deeper than just, and that include word study, spelling, word etymology, morphology, that this piece about it is not just the ability to break down a word, that's important, but it's really about how do you read and apply it or write and apply it. There are some excellent models, and I would say that our Agency of Education has this summer created something called the hierarchies, which says here are some ways in which by grade level it would look, and they go down by the domains inside. So English language arts has reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and what does that look like by grade? Those are going to be updated probably once the graduation requirements are finalized, but that's a good beginning for us. We have organizations, our state standards are the Common Core standards have an excellent set of standards and then appendices. And in the appendices, they have what does this look like, these exemplars by grade levels. Those are hugely helpful, especially for writing. And they encourage students to read something and then write about it. They call it, accountable thinking, accountable reading. So it's not just read it alone, it's read and do something with that. And so I would say there are some good exemplars. ReadWorks is an excellent site where you can find examples, Achieve the Core. There are excellent exemplars out there. And I would say that the professional learning that the Agency of Education has been bringing in has really been highlighting a lot of those resources and then embedding that into their work.
Yeah, it's very important. And thank you for the explanation. I am thinking of different students right now. I'm thinking of students on an IEP who have some, let's say, who are verbally challenged, for example, to express themselves. How can one grade them properly or appropriately, per se? Students with my background as an ELL student. Well, here's the thing. Everyone needs to remember, when an ELL speaks, I mean, not all ELLs, most ELLs, what comes to mind first, living in Vermont, someone said, oh, he has an accent, or they have an accent. As a linguist, I find that anyway funny to say that somebody has an accent, because my conclusion is just everybody has an accent, whether you like it or not. And I can define what that looks like if you need it in writing. So, I'm stating this example just to say, living in Vermont for many years, almost 30 years right now, including myself, I would go to a store just with my funny accent, or some who are kind say, oh, you have a beautiful accent. Where are you from? To start a conversation. But oftentimes it's negative. When we start to talk to somebody, just because of our accent, we are already pushed away. The listening device is already has an X on it. In many instances, in stores, at the mechanic, most of the time, that's our life. That's what we experience as ML students. So we work so hard really to be understood when we speak. I got a certificate during my TESOL training from my teacher trainer. The certificate said, the most phonetic man in the world. Who cares about that? Yes, he got it. Yes, he understands it. It's because I just know I have to enunciate to be better understood.
Yeah.
And in every language, we are taught the grammar, just the way we love our grammars.
Right.
So it becomes very hard.
Yeah, I would say for our historically marginalized populations, our cohorts, one of the things that's the most important thing is to maintain a high expectation. And then we have to figure out how to scaffold and how to provide feedback in order for students to get there. Just doing the support without the expectation doesn't give them give our students enough. And just giving the expectation without that scaffolding doesn't get students. So it's really those two pieces together. And then having systematic and explicit instruction. So every student has the ability that moves past just skill into something deeper. And I love what you're saying, and I think it's so critically important. And we should be valuing every one of our learners and find the best way to have them flourish in our learning system, be recognized, and be really invited into that deep thinking. Thank you. Yes, Jen.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, it's yours.
I'm realizing we should have put you on for longer because this is a very engaging conversation. I'm wondering, because I noticed in your report, maybe not in the slides, but in the report, and it was on page 9, where the Act 139 task is review literacy assessments and outcomes and provide recommendations to continuously improve and sustain literacy improvements. You had a note that recommendations are expected in the spring of 2026. And I'm wondering if you feel like it would be appropriate, I would invite you to come back and share those recommendations.
Sure, we'd be happy to. We'll be wrapping up in May, so it'd be in June, or it could be fall. You decide the timing. As I said, we've heard the NAEP results. We're going to be hearing our VICCAP results, and then we're also going to be looking at professional learning as what are our recommendations related to that. So that will be part of our work this spring. You let me know. I'm happy to be here. My slides were very cursory overview. Just wanted to give you some updates. And really, the most important thing we need to do is keep working collectively. And we need some funding for this. Not necessarily for the council. We need the funding for the agency in order to provide it to our school systems.
All right. It's a good place to leave off. Thank you so much for coming. Great
Thank
to see
you.
All righty. Take care.
All right. Be well, everyone.
Okay. Now, if Erin is here, we will turn to statewide graduation requirements.
I am here.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for letting us shuffle you around. I appreciate your flexibility.
Of course.
So this is our final update to the board from Erin Davis, the agency's Chief Academic Officer, to review and discuss the agency's recommendations regarding state graduation requirements. From there, the agency's recommendations will be considered in the first instance by the board's Student Performance Standards Committee before ultimately coming to the board for a final vote. So Erin, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Happy to be back with you all. And happy to have the report in your hands if we hit our December 31st deadline, and we're pleased to pass that over to you all and feel pretty proud of the work that we put into it. I wanted to start just with some reminders of key points about the graduation requirements work. Much of the impetus of this, as Secretary Saunders mentioned earlier on today's meeting, is a result of the U.S. Department of Education finding from their last monitoring visit in Vermont, which showed to us that there is inconsistency of rigor across the state as it relates to graduation requirements. We do recognize that statewide graduation requirements alone will not fully address this, but we do see them as an important first step in terms of the AOE's broader strategy and the work that's on the horizon, especially around academics. The AOE's graduation requirements report shared our recommendations and the rationale for them, as well as the areas that we hope to explore further and the next steps that we are recommending. And we have already begun some of our additional stakeholder engagement sessions that we planned in order to continue to support you all in this phase where you're in the decision-making process. Quick reminder of the timeline of events slide. This is one that I've shared a number of times as we've met monthly, just to anchor everyone to the process itself and help folks keep some key dates in mind. Any of the dates that are on here that have the asterisk next to them is an indication that those dates were set as part of sections 8A and 9A of Act 73. I'm quite pleased to move that box over to the phase that we're now in, phase 4, where we are looking at some ongoing support that the AOE can provide the state board as you engage in your decision-making process. I wanted to start by really regrounding us in the amount of stakeholder engagement that we did through the months of October and November. We certainly recognize that this was quite a compressed timeline for us to explore this topic and submit the report, but I feel quite proud of the amount of stakeholder engagement that we did, and I think the feedback that we received. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to walk you through many of the trends, and I imagine if you've already had a chance to read the report, you see how it was reflected in terms of the area of focus, where folks had specific feedback for us to consider for our recommendations. On this slide, it represents the formal group meetings that we held to talk to different stakeholder groups about the statewide graduation requirements. In total, this represents around 400 stakeholders across the state. This does not include meetings that were more one-off or with specific individual schools or just individual teachers in some cases who reached out to us. Anybody who reached out to us, we followed through and set up additional time to meet with them. So really, we've got hundreds of folks across the state who were able to give their input on this process and let us know what specific areas about the recommendations they may have had some questions or concerns about. This doesn't include the additional survey that we also did, which you may recall had 374 respondents to that as well. So really, in terms of the few months that we had to engage with folks, we had hundreds and hundreds of folks that were able to share their feedback around the process. Throughout the process. So what I've done on this slide and the next one is kind of roll up for you all the specific trends in the areas that there were questions and that we found ourselves providing answers in some cases, exploring further, and that we addressed through our recommendations. So the first one is around credits. The use of credit is a unit of measure. As a unit of measure to, our recommendation is that we use credits as a unit of measure to align with the current EQS guidance. We're defining it as 1 credit is a set of essential enduring skills and knowledge in a content area based on the typical coverage of standards, including a year-long course or equivalent learning experience. So we heard in the public comments this morning, this was one of the things that was addressed. We know that there is some real discomfort with the use of the term credit. And I actually thought Mike Weston's comments this morning were a great example of that, right? We know that many systems, when we moved to the proficiency-based graduation requirements, did some really difficult and important work through that. And for the systems that are seeing results like MMU High School is, the work that they did in collaboration with each other and the process that they underwent to get there, really was my pleasure to get to sit down with many of those educators who've been involved with that work, you know, is paying off for them in terms of student outcomes in some cases. Broadly across the state, that's not what we're seeing. There's just inconsistencies in it, right? So we've got some real bright spots like that, but it's fairly inconsistent. And where folks landed with their proficiency-based graduation requirements means that it has so many different meanings for different folks that it's become kind of difficult to get everybody on the same page with that again. So the choice to return to credits, not with the previous Carnegie unit meeting of seat time, but with the meaning that's currently reflected in EQS, was intentional. And we know that not everyone is aligned with that decision, but we feel we have very strong rationale for it. I will name, we've had different folks at different times say to us, why don't you just take our proficiency-based graduation requirements and have that be what we do at scale across the state? Because we do have some strong examples and bright spots like that. I firmly believe that the results that those systems are having is a product of the work and the process that they went through to get to those proficiency graduation requirements.
And so just picking a specific set of them and scaling, rolling those out across the state wouldn't result in the same outcomes that the systems that have done that work would. So we're making this decision with our recommendation to return to credit as the unit of measure. Most of the systems across the state, if they, even those that have gotten quite far along in their proficiency-based graduation requirements approach, are simultaneously maintaining a system that measures and tracks credits for students as well as a unit of measure. And so they're running dual systems in many cases, and we believe that this is just a simpler, less burdensome approach to it, and that for those who have already done excellent work throughout the process that they've undergone so far, that this won't require that they need to undo that work. It actually still layers on quite easily to the work that they've been doing. Proficiency-based learning has been another area that folks have had a lot of questions about as it fits within this, because as we heard, the movement within Vermont toward proficiency-based learning in many cases had a real focus on moving away from seat time, which is an important characteristic of proficiency-based learning. When we define it as an instructional model, providing students with a variety of opportunities and formats to demonstrate proficiency in specified knowledge and skills, that is an approach that we fully intend to maintain. And we believe that that can be done through credits as well as through the instructional model, especially, right? Credits as a unit of measure, as defined here, can be married with this. The locally defined proficiency-based graduation requirements are going to be replaced with the statewide graduation requirements from Act 73. And then the other thing that's bubbled even today are questions around grading, because that's another area that there's a lot of variation across the state, and that remains an area of focus for us that's quite important to address. The next big trend that we've heard has to do with how much to require. The recommendation we've made is that we do increase content requirements in some areas while building in an adequate space for flexible pathways and deeper learning for students. By not aligning the entrance requirements of Vermont's higher education institutions and making those become the graduation requirements, that's a way for us to recognize that institutions of higher education is not necessarily the post-secondary goal of all students. So we didn't feel like it was appropriate to include that in the recommendations for graduation. And then finally, the recommended 22.5 total credits that we are recommending, it supports flexible pathways as outlined in Act 73, and it allows enough space for students to make decisions about deeper learning or students with gaps to fill some of those gaps. I have two more trends that I wanted to highlight for you all. The next one has to do with transferable skills. This was another area that we got a lot of feedback. We intentionally built it into the survey that we administered because we knew that it was an area that folks really wanted to weigh in on. So our recommendation was that we integrate the transferable skills within the content requirements. We named that aligns with the stakeholder feedback that we received through the survey, and it aligns with research on the student standards, the modern student standards that the state board has already approved. These include Common Core, and we're acknowledging that when these are taught at the appropriate level of rigor, these standards provide a deeper conceptualization of content knowledge and skills that encompasses various facets of 21st century competencies, which are also often called transferable skills. And then the final area that we got considerable feedback and engagement around had to do with future readiness. So we felt like it was important to prioritize content knowledge and skills in order for our graduates to be future ready. So we intentionally named in our recommendations that this was something that we took under consideration, and we're doubling down on the need for students to have sufficient content knowledge and skills in order to be future ready. That doesn't mean that we're not doing the transferable skills, as I stated in the last point, that is already embedded in the content work. There's some early analysis around AI. AI has been another topic that's come up a couple of times today that shows that students who already have strong foundations in content knowledge and skills can use AI as a powerful tool to extend their expertise, whereas students who are lacking in terms of foundational knowledge end up relying on AI as a crutch. They're not able to be critical of the information that AI is giving back to them, and in some cases, it helps them to avoid the hard work of building true understanding. So this is a reminder that from the survey we administered, where we invited folks to build their own model of graduation requirements, that on average, they included 24 total credits as the requirement. And then what you see below there, broken down by content area, is what was included in 70% or more of the survey respondents' models. I popped that up just as a quick reminder that these are the recommendations that we submitted in our report to the board. We actually recommended a lower total number of credit. Again, that was intentional to build in the space for both deeper learning and space to fill any gaps that students may have. We increased the number of total math credits compared to what most folks had included in their Build Your Own. This is an example of where Vermont actually is being quite innovative and, at the front lines of some shifts that are happening when we think about content across the country. We know that historically pre-calculus, calculus have kind of been the finish line that folks have thought about. And when we think about a very linear sequential sequence of math topics or engagements that students have, and we're shifting away from that and including a credit that addresses the need for students to be proficient in statistics or data science, because we believe that this will help them to be more ready post-secondary. And then the only other area that we were misaligned with what folks included in their build their own recommendations was the electives with a total of 3 credits. I showed you all a version of this slide the last time that I met with you, and it prompted some questions in terms of the level of readiness for some of our schools and systems with some of these changes. We had gone through our analysis of the credits that are currently being required across the state and identified the areas where our recommendations were significantly different from what they're currently requiring. That specifically focused around math, health, art, financial literacy, and world languages. What I've done for each of these, and you'll see this in the report as well, is I've built out a little bit of a further explanation of what the actual shift would be. So for example, with the art requirements, 88% of supervisory unions or districts would be increasing their art requirements if they were to meet the expectation that we included in our recommendations of 1.5 credits. Many of them already require 1 credit of art. So it in fact would only be 0.5 increase, just to give you a little bit more of a sense of what the shift itself would be more specifically. Similarly, with the math requirements, I provided a little bit of the rationale on the previous slide. We know that other states are beginning to shift toward a total of 4 math credits, similar to the way we require 4 ELA credits in most states. But there is a significant shift in terms of what content from mathematics those credits would cover. The health requirements in most systems currently, they require 0.5 credits. Our recommendation of increasing that to a full credit, we believe pretty strongly will help meet the needs of our students and prepare them for their post-secondary experiences. I heard Brian mention earlier some questions around mental health support, social emotional support that could be built out if we had more coverage, more credits that were required for health. Additionally, there's a new report that just came out from the AG's office and the Council on Domestic Violence that suggested as one of their next steps, actually in their findings, that our schools for K-12 are able to support students with some further education around domestic and dating violence prevention. So those are just kind of some examples that an increase in credits for health would allow for students to experience and learn about.
The financial literacy standalone requirement in many cases is already embedded in other content requirements that systems have. It would be new for it to be standalone. There's quite a bit of research that's shown that there's stronger outcomes when it's treated separately and given the focus that it deserves in terms of preparing students for post-secondary readiness. And then finally, world language has been one of the areas with the most interest around that being part of the graduation requirements, because we know that there are challenges around staffing, for example, for this. I just want to point out that this is one of the areas that Vermont actually is one of only 12 states that has neither a world language requirement nor a requirement that world language courses be offered. And that's pretty misaligned with what's currently in EQS that requires students to engage in learning around global citizenship, including world languages. So this is an opportunity for us to be more aligned with what we say is important for students to get to experience. A reminder of our next steps then, we are already engaging in additional stakeholder engagement. We're excited about bringing more youth voice into the conversation than we've been able to date, and we'll be sharing a report on that with you. We're continuing to engage with institutes of higher education to understand what they're seeing from our Vermont graduates. We are also launching the working groups. You heard Stephanie Vogel refer earlier today to her being a member of our working group that's focused on accessibility for all students. That one's launching at the end of this month. We have a number of other ones that are supporting us in thinking through how to operationalize the credit expectations and make direct connections to specific student standards. And then we're also connecting with folks around the following focus areas. These are also outlined in the report. CTE continues to be one that we need to make sure we're attending to with the one diploma approach. I already mentioned accessibility for all. We're looking at strengthening the instructional core and some more coordinated curriculum. And finally, we continue with the opportunity to have deeper learning with that flexibility that we've built into the requirements that we're recommending, to look at different seals or endorsements to really recognize when students are going above and beyond in their learning, especially in specific areas that they could be recognized for, the way that you might in college be recognized for your major. Wanted to call out for you all and others a couple of resources that are linked in the report. So the 50-state comparison for graduation requirements will let you all get a sense of what the requirements are in other states. The 2025 State of Competency-Based Education, which in Vermont we call proficiency-based learning. There is a landing page for that where you can see that even if we were to change back to credits as a unit of measure, the way that we're approaching this still allows us to be one of the leaders in competency-based education across the country. I know we were one of the front runners with it, so it's pretty exciting to see that continue. And then lastly, I wanted to call everyone's attention to Appendix D. I know not everyone spends a lot of time in appendices necessarily. We did build into that appendix, though, 4 example student profiles to give a sense of how students could satisfy the graduation requirements that we've recommended. So there's a CTE example, there's a flexible pathways example for students, a student that's satisfying some of these requirements in ways that align to Act 77. There's a 4-year college-bound example, which we acknowledge in there could also be a CTE example. And then finally, we have one for a student who needs additional support in order to graduate. I think that's the one that's the strongest example of how our recommendations align with a proficiency-based approach. What you'll see in there is there's a couple of courses and learning experiences that that student is engaging in that actually don't count as credits toward their graduation requirements because they are remedial classes in some examples, or intervention support kind of coursework that they're engaging in. And so just wanted to, again, direct you all to those resources to make sure you were aware of them and to see how that's aligning to our overall approach. I know we solicited questions from the board in advance and we didn't receive any, but I imagine some of our conversation today may have prompted some new questions for you. So at this point, I'd love to open the floor and see if there's any that we can address in our time together.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. very helpful and really appreciate the tremendous amount of work that the agency has already done in compiling data and putting recommendations together, because certainly that will make the job of the board much easier to sort of take that and go with it. And I know that the agency is also going to be on hand as the board, takes the baton to provide support, answer questions, do additional research as necessary. So thank you for that. Do board members have questions? I have a couple, but didn't want to jump in first. I guess what maybe the easier question is, with the world language requirement, as I look at that slide and the adjustments that would be made, that one seems to be the most challenging in terms of a school to satisfy, because it's not easy to find a world language teacher. So I don't know, do you have recommendations for how to achieve that requirement?
Yeah, so we acknowledge that that is a very real constraint that folks are feeling right now. We have partnered initially a little bit to kind of understand what the gap is. I mean, in some cases, the gap is, if we're not asking for them, then it becomes, sorry, let me make that clear. If we're not staffing for full-time world language teachers, that in itself can be a barrier when teachers are having to be split across multiple schools or only offered a half-time position. I know that's something that happened at my high school way back when, and we've heard from folks in the field is continues to be a challenge, or they're being split across the middle school and the high school. And so I do think that this is a case where, we do need to dig in a little further with our licensure folks and see about some further data that we can offer you. But if we are to begin requiring it and it hits a critical mass of students who need to be exposed to it, then there are more favorable employment opportunities available for world language teachers, and it could help drive, more interest in that specifically being an employment opportunity. Because right now, if you're going through a teacher certification program and you know that there's not going to be very many spots out there, that may not be the area that you choose to focus your studies in.
Yeah, and I'm speaking sort of as, my experience as a parent in this part of Vermont, where I think most schools do have a foreign language requirement. I know it has always been challenging when a teacher leaves to find a replacement.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that. The other thing I'm trying to wrap my head around, and it's like trying to hold water, where I think I have it, and then I'm like, I just want to make sure I have it. So with the 22.5 credits, understanding that you're really looking at, a certain level of mastery and not seat time, does that contemplate that a student might take more than a year to obtain a credit in a particular subject?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. And so
and you'll see in that Appendix D, you'll see it modeled out for you in a way that I hope is helpful.
And I did look at that,
yeah.
So then, that was kind of like one data point. My next question is, obviously there are going to be other kids who are going to blow through those 22.5 credits quickly. And it's not that we want them to leave high school early. So I'm assuming that there's going to be this expectation that kids, I mean, you've got, early college and dual enrollment, but for the average student, the idea is that they will continue to be in their high school and, taking other classes, maybe in addition to the 3 electives that are, part of the 22.5 credits. But then when I'm thinking about, kids graduating from a school, let's say you've got, one kid who took 4 years to get 22.5 credits, and then you've got another kid who has, those 22.5 credits, plus all these extra classes that reflect that student's unique interests, and maybe even has, some sort of seal on their diploma. And then I go back to the original thought about inequity. And so I'm trying to kind of hold all of that together in my head in a way that makes sense.
I appreciate the way that you're grappling with this, Jennifer. what I think you're highlighting is a need to catch students upstream. So if students have these kind of profound learning gaps and proficiency gaps that you're describing by the time they enter high school, that means that they've maybe been overlooked in terms of being given the support that they need sooner. Right? We want for this, and I hope it's been clear each month when I've met with you and framing this as a pre-K through 12 strategy, that we're going to use the graduation requirements as the finish line, but then pull it all the way down to pre-K so that we can be really intentional in making sure that students are getting the support they need as soon as gaps are identified. I thought Gwen put it really beautifully in terms of the balance of high expectations and then scaffolds and supports. If you're only doing one or the other, you're not, setting students up for success. I will name that in some cases when I've been talking to folks about the trickle down of the proficiency-based graduation requirements to the earlier grades, I think it has unintentionally, in some cases, resulted in in a lowering of expectations, really. There hasn't been the clear focus on grade level standards such that the board has already approved. And so we're hoping that this will allow us to strengthen the whole system, both holding high expectations and providing the supports in a way to avoid what you're describing, which is students entering high school with such significant gaps that instead of being able to explore their deeper interests the way some of their peers are, they're having to fill in those gaps to be able to meet the minimum graduation requirements.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Mohammed, Tom?
Hey, thank you, Aaron. I'm good to see you again with the wonderful presentation. I struggle a lot whenever I hear world language, just because the languages I want to lift up are not apparently counted as world languages. I am at a district where most of the languages are spoken in East Africa, somewhere maybe in the Middle East. These are not counted as world languages. And what do we do to support these languages? And it's so sad when you hear a grandparent come to me really trying to find a balance on how to communicate with their own child, or grandchild. Here's the thing. We are pushing our students to learn English. While we're doing this in a beautiful way, unfortunately, they are losing their language of origins in a way that at home, they can barely have a 2-minute conversation with a grandmother, sometimes a mother, sometimes a grandfather, just because the child is consuming so much English. And then they don't have anybody out there to help them with their own language, native language. I'm going to give an example again. I supervise a team of 9 multilingual liaisons who provide in class support. Some of them, yes, have some licenses from abroad, not considered here for sure. These multilingual liaisons, we use them when we have money to provide the native language instruction. Currently, we don't have any money for that. Our 221C learning has taken on at least 2 of the languages currently doing it. Actually, no, I changed that. It has went down to 1 language only, just because of money. So we used to provide a language class in Nepali, Swahili, Arabic, French, you name it. When we had the SF funds, all gone. We can't do it anymore. And these liaisons, they have the capacity to teach, but we don't have money to pay them to teach. And to integrate all these skills in our daily work, where is the licensing? for someone to teach Swahili? Where is the licensing for someone to teach any other language you might think of in any other school out there? That's the inequity I see mostly when I hear the word language. And do students have the options to pick and choose what language they want to learn? Of course, they want to learn their own languages if they get a chance to, but they are not getting it and they're losing it. You lose a language, you lose a whole culture. And that's not fair. I speak 7 languages. I dream in all of them because I got the support to do that. And I am dedicated to do that. And nobody's pushing me to do it. I did it all by myself as a learner. Yes, of course, with the support of my teachers. But that motivation comes from the learner first and the family. But what can we do to support our students' languages of origin without naming it world language? Because what is called world language right now is not, it doesn't make sense to me as a linguist at all. I just want to put that out there so we can think about it.
Yeah, I
And thank
appreciate
you
that.
for
I
the
know.
wonderful work you do as well.
Thank you. You know that I'm quite aligned with many of your beliefs around this personally, because of students that I've had in the past. And actually, my undergraduate minor was in linguistics. So a few things in there that I wanted to address specifically. So one around, you know, we fund what's required when we're having to make difficult funding decisions. If language as a requirement becomes part of this, then we can keep the funding for those roles a little bit more stable, but still acknowledging that we're in a difficult context right now. We no longer have the ESSER funding. The other thing that I would say is that for students, we would want to, and Stephanie will be an important member of our Accessibility for All Learners working group, have a way to acknowledge their home languages as part of this process, right? So that's the logistics of that is something that we're still exploring at the student level. And then I also heard within what you're describing a question around the terminology. I know within the field of education, there's been a movement away from calling things foreign languages to calling them world languages, certainly open to further adjustments that could feel more inclusive and representative of our students here in Vermont.
Thank you, Irena.
May I ask a follow-up to that before we shift?
Oh, sure. Yeah, didn't mean
Is
to
that
cut you
okay?
off, Brian.
Tom, is that okay? I just wanted to follow up on Mohammed's question and concern. So, Mohammed, is what you see as perhaps a solution to this? Well, I'm not sure, actually. Can you help me understand what would be a good solution? Because I really like what you're talking about in terms of, my gosh, there are so many languages out there in our own communities. You know, we I think sometimes get pigeonholed in schools to say, oh, you have to learn, you know, French, German, Latin, whatever. But given the state of the world right now, I mean, sort of the more languages people know, of course, the better. And so I'm just trying to get to understand what you see as a possible solution so that we can do exactly what you're talking about. Preserve languages,
Brian.
yes, but also kind of, you know, introduce them to people that, you know, might not know them.
Thank you, Brian, for that wonderful question. At the WSD, Winooski School District, we initiated a way to support and celebrate our students' religions, cultures, wherever they come from. We celebrate anything, Halloween, Christmas, you name it. So that's the way also we support languages. We came up with a rubric to match our performance indicators, thinking of a language such as Nepali, for example, and how do we assess a student who did not do well in French?
Mm-hmm.
I understand the reason behind it. Someone might not even like French or interested in French the way I was taught French.
Right, right.
I went to a school Well, I was not even asked the first day whether I want to learn French or Arabic. I had to learn both at once. I was not, it was mandatory. Whereas here, they have French class. They have to have 2.6 to be considered proficient. So whomever is under 2.6, the strategy we found is, okay, how about we assist them in their native language to fulfill the gap that is missing? So we created this rubric that our liaisons, including myself, will interview our students who speak other languages than French to fill the gap and not to hinder what is missing in the 2.6 for them to be considered proficient. We initiated that officially last year in writing, and we apply to help students really see themselves in their learning and demonstrate and even encourage them to learn their own languages. You don't like French? Well, how about your own language? So you can communicate with grandma at home or your mom at home, things like that. So that is one thing we're doing at WSD right now. But again, we lost most of it because we have no money to do it. Right. Currently, we only have Nepali ongoing, and that is only during the weekend. But when we had money, it was intensive. But right now, only one group is having it, and only during the weekend, and we feel bad about it. It's not equitable.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So that's one of the strategies we're doing to support the languages around this.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Mohammed. Tom, Cynthia, and then we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. And as I said before, I appreciate this is hard work, and I think what I have is a bunch of questions, but they might end up being comments. But I'll just start with the language issue that we're talking about. I think that what Mohammed is talking about is possible if our focus is on proficiency and not credit. It's possible to say that you're proficient in a language, provided you have the expert assessor, as long as there's somebody there who knows what that language is and can assess proficiency. So the whole assessment part of this is in the back of my mind. What does it mean to attain a credit? And so that's my first question maybe is, the definition of credit is a typical year-long course or the equivalent learning experience, and I wonder how that's defined. As somebody who's taught English language for a long time, I taught way more works of literature in my AP or accelerated classes than I did for my more standard or basic level classes, yet they were still held to the same standards. Then that's how we define the course. So I'm not sure how we get away from proficiency in defining credits. I'm not sure that we're getting away from it. So that's kind of, I'll be interested to hear what you say about that. I also saw in one of the, I think it was about language, that some schools, there was a measure about exposure to a language, the opportunity to experience a language course. And I wonder if is that a criteria? Is that going to be part of the requirement, or are we expecting proficiency, that they actually take a course, get a credit in language? And then my third question, I'm sorry, I'm doing this rapid fire. It sounds to me like there could be a lot of grade retention if we have grade level standards, and we're going to hold students and teachers accountable for students reaching that. So no more social promotion, no more staying with your cohort if you're not meeting grade level standards. And I know in elementary school, where they're all in the same classroom for most of the day versus the high school classroom, that might be even more complex than what I'm talking about. And then what I've seen, again, this has been more proficiency based, that some students are not ready to graduate with their cohort and have to repeat another year or more than one to get to the level of proficiency that was required. And so and many times they don't have the resilience. They don't want to persevere in their education. They just drop out before they do that. So I wonder if any of those conversations, you've had those conversations, if those came up in your feedback from the field. But I think they're all part of this picture.
That's right. Yeah, so all of the above came up in our conversations with folks in schools. Your first point around the way that credits and proficiencies work together, your understanding of it is exactly how we're trying to describe it. So students would be given credit for showing proficiency in the standards that would map onto the credit itself. So something like an Algebra 1 credit requirement would have a set amount of standards that we would expect to be covered. If a student took more than a year to satisfy that, as you'll see in that Appendix D example, they would still receive 1 math credit for the Algebra 1 content. So it's still very much aligns to a proficiency-based approach and is using credits as the unit of measure within that. The world languages question, we heard from folks in the field around the idea of exposure rather than proficiency in a world language. I think that's something we would need to make a decision about once we start mapping the proficiencies onto the credit requirements. And then, I had your third question and now I've lost it, Tom. I'm so sorry. Can you jog my memory?
It was, it's about about retaining students in grade before they get to high school. Yeah.
Yes. And so there's quite a bit of research around the detrimental effects of retention, right? I mean, that certainly isn't, and I come from, most of my career was working in a state that had 3rd grade retention laws that were pretty draconian. And so, the intention here is that we do what Gwen described, that we say, here's the focus on the grade level standards and expectations, and we hold students to those high expectations, but that we build out a much more robust support and scaffolding system to make sure that we're accelerating students and closing those gaps. Some of those systems are not in a strong place in Vermont right now. And, I've been out visiting schools pretty extensively. A trend that I'm seeing in the pre-K through 8 system, I'm sure it exists in the high school settings as well, but I'm seeing, for example, curricular programs that are meant to be intervention programs used for the Tier 1 first-time instruction. And when we do that, a student will never close the learning gaps that they have because we're supplanting the instructional time that is meant to be on grade level instruction with intervention and remedial instruction. So it's shifts in practices like that. Again, I think when we see it, it's coming from a good place of trying to meet students where they're at, but compounded year over year over year, the gap that students, the learning gaps that they have, expand. And so we really do have some, guidance, support, and expectations as an agency that we need to be really clear about the way we should be doing instruction and holding those high expectations and also supporting students that do have those gaps so that we can meet them where they are and lift them up, close those gaps as quickly as possible. Retention is not our first tool in that toolkit of things that we can do to support students to meet higher expectations.
Thank you.
I just want to expand on that. I really appreciate this conversation and want to name that what we're describing is raising the bar. And when we're engaging in that work, right, graduation requirements are one tool. That's not the extent of all of the tools that will need to be implemented and leveraged to increase the educational opportunities. When we are engaging in these discussions, I think it's important to talk about rigor and equity, right? So we're talking about rigor in terms of really increasing the level of expectations, and we're talking about equity in terms of ensuring that we are putting in place the right level of support for all students to be able to meet those expectations. And so I think this is a really important conversation, and we'll continue. This equity and rigor discussion needs to continue to be part of the framework as we're engaging and setting those clear expectations, and then really looking at how we're operationalizing that in terms of implementing the right level of support across the system. So because we know all students can achieve at high levels when given the right level of support. And so I just wanted to reflect on that and name that we are moving in a direction where we are working to elevate those expectations and doing it in a way that is equitable and really being intentional around the support infrastructure that is required so that every student has the opportunity to excel.
Thanks, Zoe. Cynthia, before I turn it to you, I just want to mention for those who are not able to see the chat that Stephanie Vogel, with regard to the language requirement, said that the Vermont Seal of Biliteracy is committed to every language being able to be assessed free of charge for all students, so which is terrific.
And that would be a way for students to satisfy that requirement.
I'm sorry to cut you off about that too. The seal we're talking about, that is actually where the base of the inequity has started. Technically, we should not assess a student in any language without teaching them in that language or in anything. If the seal is there, if a seal is out there, really, it should be free. And some seals are out there, a student has to pay to actually even take the seal. It's looking at the seal, understanding how to assess students. Honestly speaking, I push that away. Honestly speaking. It doesn't align with our reality. It does not. And I'm happy to look into it with anyone else out there. I'm happy to form a committee around it.
Well, I'm glad that you're on
Not
the
just to
student performance
criticize, not just to
committee.
criticize, but really to support us all and be aligned with what we're doing, and that makes sense. If someone is given a seal, they are not assessed in writing, reading, speaking, and all other domains, it's nonsense. That seal is nonsense. And some people here in Vermont took advantage of the seal without actually going through all the details of it. And that's not ethic. That's not normal. I just want to put it out there. I'm sorry. If anyone here is working with the seal, it's not I'm against you. It's about our reality. It doesn't match our reality, and it's not supporting our students.
Well, I appreciate that feedback, and I am glad that you're on the Student Performance Standards Committee, because I know this is going to come up as you guys are working through this recommendation for a foreign language credit. So thank you. Cynthia.
Jen, I can hold my question. I've got it documented. There'll be further conversations. I know we're in a short today, so that's fine.
Well, I'll leave that up to you, but
yeah, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. All right. We will leave it there. Aaron, thank you again. And I'm sure we will be seeing more of you as we work through this.
Yeah, I know you've got other things on your plate. In the meantime, appreciated the timeline update from Tammy earlier. Let us know how we can be of further assistance through the process. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, so next up we have.
If I may, sorry,
yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Cynthia and others, if there were questions that came up today for you that you made note of, like you said, Cynthia, or that percolate as you think this through, feel free to direct them to me and I'll collate them so that the committee has those questions as we start our work on this. Okay.
Thanks. Okay, independent school approvals. I'm going to turn this over to Tom. We've got 3 schools that are coming up for renewal today. So Tom, thank you.
We do. And I'll begin with priority placements. Priority Placements is an approved therapeutic school in Brattleboro serving students in grades kindergarten through grade 12, ages 5 to 22. They have 2 locations in Brattleboro, one for the elementary program, one for the middle school and high school program. They moved from a tutorial to a school in 2019, but they've been in operation for a while. Their facilities are open, filled with natural light, ADA compliant. They have outdoor spaces, and both facilities have kitchens able to be used for instruction. At the time of the visit, there were 10 students in the elementary program, 13 students in grades 7 through 12. Maximum for both programs is 14. They do have a wait list, and they run on a 175-day calendar. Their mission is to serve distressed children and adolescents who are suddenly unable to access their public school education. The visiting team found that they were well managed, safe, positive, effective environment, which is in there also their mission. Students who come to priority placements generally return to their home school in 2.5 years. Their governance structure is currently 5 members and an advisory board, but they're revamping that board mission and expanding to 7 members. And that board will evaluate the head of school, provide community connections and fiscal management, plus their advisory role. Right now, the head of school is the main channel through which people join the board, but that will change once the board is expanded and they can take on that governance committee role. Curriculum instruction at the school was flexible and differentiated. Students had access to additional support. Every school, in line with what we heard today, every part of the school, every course, every program had a focus on writing and literacy. There were a variety of classroom settings, and students did have access to dual enrollment and CTE courses. The staffing of the school meets the professional qualifications required by rule. Staff was able to articulate how they adapted curriculum to meet individual goals and social, emotional, behavioral objectives. They had 2 licensed special educators, a social worker in the high school, and a clinical mental health clinician in the elementary school. Their finances were solid. They're funded through districts, and as I said, they have a waiting list, so there doesn't seem to be any financial difficulty at all. They comply with all the rules. So I'd like to make the motion that the State Board of Education grants renewal of therapeutic independent school approval to priority placements in Brattleboro, Vermont, to serve students in grades K through 12. The renewal approval period is for the full term of 5 years through June 30, 2030. And this approval is conditional on the requirement that the school reports to the Agency of Education within 5 business days whenever any changes occur in enrollment, programs, policies, facilities, financial capacity, staffing, or administration during the approval period. That's my motion.
I'll
I'm gonna
second that
that.
motion.
Rich has got there first.
Thank you. So just a comment and a question. My comment was, it was a pleasure to read this report. It's really clear to me just how well created and run the school is, and I just want to acknowledge that. It was a pretty glowing report, which I think really speaks to a lot of the good work that the school is doing. So I wanted to acknowledge that. And then I'm just curious, and this is maybe a question for all 3 schools, if the renewal period is for the full term of 5 years, June 30, 2030 is, not even 4.5 years away. Is there any argument for going to, June 30, 2031, or are we really looking at can't be more than 5 years, therefore it has to be less?
Yeah, that's my understanding is that it cannot be more than 5 years.
Okay.
We have in the past recommended a shorter approval period.
Right.
So that's my understanding.
Okay. Deb, did you have a?
Yes, and I think I can probably provide a little clarity. At the time that the renewal report was done, because of the internal vetting process with Pat's retirement and other things, it delayed getting the report out to the head of school for the 30-day review period. I should have, and this is on me, I should have gone back to adjust the renewal due date and updated it from 2030 to 2031. And And so I'll take responsibility for that. I
So
apologize to the board.
No, that's okay, but I mean, we do have it within our authority to approve them through June 30, 2031. Okay.
Yeah.
I would make a motion to amend Tom's motion to have the renewal period run through June 30, 2031.
That's a friendly amendment.
I think we're around everywhere though. All different.
Those were my questions. Any other questions?
I might not get to those today because I'm doing my 1099.
All right. Hearing nothing further, if we are ready to vote, all those in favor of approving the motion as read by Tom with my friendly amendment to extend the renewal approval period through June 30, 2031, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Tom, back to you.
Yes, and just Sarah and Evan, if you're just coming on, congratulations. We
Yes.
just,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
the second school on our agenda is the new school of Montpelier. It also is an approved therapeutic school. It's got two campuses, one in Montpelier and one in Newport. Plus they have an adult program in Barry, Vermont. But the school serves students in grades 1 through 12, ages 6 through 22. They've been in operation since 2005, so just on their 20-year anniversary. They have several buildings in Montpelier. They own a gym. They rent additional classroom space from the Vermont College of Fine Arts, which they abut. They had 22 students in several programs, elementary and high school programs. They also have what they call the Bridges program, which are for students with complex communication needs. And it's the adult version of that program, the Bridges program, that is at Borelli's Farm in Barry. The Newport program is an intensive program serving 8 students. It used to be in West Glover, but was relocated to have more access to services. They have a substantial wait list at both locations, and they run on a 219-day school calendar. Fascinating governance structure. They are an employee-owned cooperative, the only one in Vermont. To be on the board, to be part owner, you have to be employed for 2 years, complete owner member training. That they have 25 members currently. The board is a 7-member board. They have 3-year rotating terms and can be reappointed once, and then they have to go off the board for a year. The majority of the board is made up of employees, but they do have some parents. Their curriculum instruction is broken into 4 phases from proficiencies, very much in line with what we were talking about today. So K2 strand, 3 to 5 strands, 6 through 8, and then a 9 through 12 high school strand. All of them are differentiated, multimodal, using technology to support learners. Each student has a one-on-one support. In high school, they introduce life skills and employability training and internships, personal finance, and post-secondary transitional service, which is in cooperation with the Agency of Human Services. Their staff are well qualified. They're all pursuing more credentials. They are very well staffed, extensive staffing. They exceed minimum standards significantly. And the admin for the new school serves all 3 campuses, but for our purposes, specifically the Montpelier and Newport campuses. They provided a 15-year look back to prove that they have the financial resources and have had the financial resources to stay in business. They comply with all rules. So I'd like to make a motion that the State Board of Education grants renewal of therapeutic independent school approval to the new school of Montpelier and Newport, Vermont, to serve students in first grade through grade 12, ages 6 through 22. The renewal period extends for the full 5 years through June 30, 2031. This approval is conditioned on the requirement that the school reports to the Agency of Education within 5 business days whenever any changes occur in enrollment, programs, policies, facilities, financial capacity, staffing, or in administration during the approval period. It's my motion.
I see Rich moving. I'm gonna say Rich seconded.
I'm sorry, I did. I was saying I will second if Cynthia doesn't want to.
Thank you, Rich. Another really good report. It's always nice to read reports like this. And I guess the other thing too that I will just take a moment to say is as I'm reading through the reports, it seems like they're the agency is first of all generating reports that are much more similar from one to the next, which actually makes it easier to go through and see where the differences are. So I want to acknowledge that because it made it easier for me to read through it. But also I also appreciate you tying it directly back into the 2200 requirements and literally going through the list of requirements that are embedded in the 2200 series. So thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the motion, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Our third school is Brightality, which came before our committee a few years ago in 2022 for their initial approval, and now they are back for a renewal because the first approval is only for 2 years. For a renewal of approval, but also to amend their application to open a second, another program in another town to serve more students. So Brightality is an approved therapeutic school in St. Albans, serving students in grades 6 through 12, ages 11 through 22. They're requesting to add a vocational program to serve 10 more students, bringing their maximum capacity up to 34. That program will be located in Swanton. At the time of the visit, they had 18 students, 15 in the high school program, 3 in the middle school program. They have a 4-to-1 student-teacher ratio, operating on a 175-day calendar. Their goal is to provide students with confidence and independence in their and to return to their home school if possible. Their facilities is a Victorian building in St. Albans. You might remember back when they were initially approved, we delayed that approval or made it dependent on their doing some ADA compliance renovations. Those have been completed, and the facility is in excellent shape. Their vocational facility in Swanton has been redesigned for their vocational courses, also ADA compliant. Their governance, they are a for-profit school. They have a 7-member advisory board made up of diverse cohorts, mental health provider, local business owner, etc. They follow the Common Core, Vermont graduation proficiencies, personalized learning plans in their curriculum and instruction. It's differentiated and multimodal, and students do have access to dual enrollment and career and technical education. I think they had 1 student last year take advantage of that. The vocational amendment has been requested by sending schools, will provide students with employability training, internships, independent living, courses, personal finance. It will run programs such as wiring, plumbing, automotive, career and job awareness, and these will be aligned with the content area proficiencies. Excuse me. Their staffing meets the qualification requirements by rule. The content area teachers work closely with their licensed special educator and behavioral specialists. They contract out for some services like speech and language pathologists, occupational therapy, physical therapy, etc. Their vocational staff is trained by OSHA. Their finances are solid. The tuition is set by the agency. They expect to meet their enrollment goals for that vocational program, given the interest by the sending schools. There's no problem with meeting enrollment goals in their St. Albans facility. They comply with all 2200 state board rules. And so I will make the motion. The State Board of Education grants renewal of therapeutic independent school approval to Britality in St. Albans, Vermont, to serve middle and high school students in grades 6 through 12, ages 11 through 22, and to approve the school's amendment request to add a vocational program and add to their enrollment capacity an additional 10 students, bringing the maximum enrollment capacity to 34 students. This approval will be for the full period of 5 years through June 30, 2031. This approval is conditioned on the requirement that the school reports to the Agency of Education within 5 business days whenever any changes occur in enrollment programs, policies, facilities, financial capacity, staffing, or administration during the approval period. That's my motion.
I'll second that, Tom.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes, Rich.
So I see in the secretary's recommended action, I didn't see the increase in capacity.
Yeah, that was something that came up in the meeting with the school. And so when the committee voted this out of committee, we added that additional capacity. It wasn't in the original green sheet, but that's why I'm making the motion today.
So the secretary's good with that, I would imagine, or she would have been jumping up and down.
Have an objection.
Any other questions or comments? It's another good report. Thank you. All right, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the motion, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Tom, Cynthia, and Brian for the work that you're doing on the committee. All right, future meeting planning. I'll just pull up my running list here. So for February, I anticipate that we will have secretary's report, independent school approvals, the Student Performance Standards Committee update, a legislative review committee update. Rich, might there be a state aid for school construction advisory board update?
There may.
Okay, if there is, let me know and we'll put you on there. And then we will have the special education advisory panel update from Katie Ballard. Anything else? Okay, so hearing none, this brings us to public to be heard. If there are any members of the public who wish to address the board, you can raise your hand or *5 if you're calling in. Giving a good look here. I don't see anyone. So if there's no public to be heard, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make that motion.
All right, thank you, Rich. Cynthia, I'm looking at you.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we stand in adjournment. Thank you all. Hope you have a great afternoon.